This is the April 8th meeting of the Long Licensing Committee of the Utah State Board of Education. Welcome to you all. I'm Carol Lear. I'm the chair of the committee, and thank you so much. I pointed out earlier and noted earlier that we have 2 USB staff members for every board committee member, so that is very appreciated support. We need it, and thank you all for your help and support and your expertise. So because it's after 9 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started. I think everyone, all the committee members are here, perhaps except Vice Chair Cindy Davis. So let's just begin, because it gives us a moment of pause with the committee members introducing themselves. I'll begin by saying I represent the current District 7, soon to become District 6. It's made up of most of Salt Lake City and all of Park City area. And Vice Chair Booth.
Thank you. I am Randy Booth, and I represent District 13, which includes Nebo School District and a part of Provo City School District.
Thank you. And Member Klein.
Hi, my name is Natalie Klein. I am the board member over District 11, which is most of Jordan School District, just a small bit of Alpine and Canyons District as well.
And I think that has anybody seen Cindy Davis sign on yet? Nope, I'm hearing not. So we'll proceed, and I'm sure she'll be here. And welcome Superintendent Dixon also, and again, all of the staff that's so helpful. And we also have a couple of participating visitors. So we will have you introduce yourself when the item comes. So our first item on the agenda is an action item on a request from Spectrum Academy, a charter school, for a waiver of provisions in R277-419, the pupil accounting rule. And with that, I will turn that to, I believe, our AAG Ashley Beal to explain that request. And then we also have, and then Jamie Christensen is with us. And Jamie, if you will just stay tuned, and we'll ask you if you have anything to add after Ashley's introduction. So, Ashley.
All right, thank you, Chair. Okay, so Spectrum Academy has requested a waiver under R277121 and met the requirements under the checklist that was provided to them. And all supporting documentation has been uploaded into Civic Clerk for your review. The request made is to waive Rule 277-419-4, which is the requirement that requires 180 days of school instruction. This request is being made so that students would be required to attend schools Monday through Thursday with optional attendance on Fridays. School days Monday through Thursday would include a total of 6.75 hours with a half-hour lunch for 6.25 instructional hours total. This would make up a total for the year of 993.5 hours of instruction and a minimum of 153 days. This request is being made because 85 to 90% of Spectrum's students have IEPs, and teachers currently do not have enough planning time to accomplish their data review and collection, writing IEPs, and lesson planning. And this time constraint has been cited by previous employees as a prime reason of their resignation as well. It's noted that 3 surveys were sent out by the Spectrum board to parents and staff between December 2021 and February 2022, and 99% of students and 91% of staff who responded supported this proposal. And this request was unanimously approved by the Spectrum Academy Board at their February 16th, 2022 meeting. I've drafted a draft waiver agreement that has been sent to Jeannie Christensen. And this waiver would presumptively start at the beginning of the 2022 to 2023 school year and end at the end of the 2024 to 2025 school year.
Okay, then, before we go to committee questions, Jamie, Ms. Christensen, I think it's Dr. Christensen, would you like to add anything to this, to Ashley's explanation?
No, I think she covered everything. Just a real focus on making sure that the educational time that is spent is quality time instead of teachers taking part of the time out of the school day anyway to try to fulfill their legal obligations as far as IEPs and specially designed instruction. So that's the focus. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, would you introduce yourself, please?
So sorry. Yes. Jamie Christensen. I'm the Executive Director of Academics for Spectrum Academy Charter Schools.
Thank you. And we've all actually, I forgot to have one board member introduce himself, and Vice Chair Davis have joined us. So I will, if it's okay, Matt and Cindy, I will let that go as your introductions. Thank you so much for all being here today. It's so helpful to always have a complete committee to have these discussions. So, and thank you, Jamie, for that addition in your introduction. I'm trying to decide where to go first. I think one of the questions that came up in our preliminary discussion of the agenda items that we kind of in our executive discussion of the agenda items was if there were concerns from the state special ed department about the adequacy, and for lack of a better quick word, under IDEA of time spent with students that are a super majority of students who have IEPs. So I noted that Dr. Leah Voorhees, the Assistant Superintendent over Student Affairs and Services and Special Education, is with us. So Leah, would you mind addressing that question, and then we'll have any discussion or questions from committee members?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to address it. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support, which includes being the State Director of Special Education, which is what applies to this particular question. So AAG Beal shared this request with me, so I had some opportunity to review all of the documents and think through the request as it relates to the implementation of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and providing students with a free, appropriate public education, a FAPE, which is the requirement under IDEA. And the Spectrum Academy certainly could provide students a FAPE with a 4-day week and an optional 5th day. As stated in their request, the majority of students that attend the Spectrum schools are eligible for special education. I can foresee that it will be some work for Spectrum to review each IEP of the 85-ish% of their students that are eligible for special education, to make sure that the way they are written is still compliant if this request is approved, but also at least some, and of course I haven't seen them, so I can't say how many, but at least some of the IEPs will need to be revised, and IEPs can be amended without a meeting by parents in the LEA agreeing to it, but some of them will likely require actual meetings because the way that the IEPs are written will require the IEP team to rethink
the services and supports that a student needs to be able to access the general education curriculum and receive a FAPE. And so it is definitely possible. Spectrum Academy is very good at working with teams to develop IEPs that are compliant and also that provide for the services and supports that students need. So if this request is approved, I don't have concerns that Spectrum is in jeopardy of not providing FAPE. I don't have any concerns. I do have some concerns for their task list because all of those IEPs are going to need to be reviewed to ensure that they are still compliant. And some of them will likely require an actual meeting, even if they have, just barely met a couple weeks ago or a month ago, to ensure that the IEP team is adequately thought through. Do the services and supports on the IEP meet the needs with the change? But I don't have concerns about them not being able to provide FAPE in a 4-day +1 type of schedule.
Okay,
Does that answer your question, Chair Lear?
that is very helpful. I appreciate your expertise. I have a couple questions, but let me see if the other committee members have any questions. Member Booth.
Thank you, Chair Lear. I would be interested in knowing if there might be some faculty member or staff member who could take responsibility for that optional 5th day for those students whose parents or in the IEP negotiations, if they determine that they really need that 5th day. I could see that with the teachers needing the time to do what we're trying to accomplish with this request, that those who do feel that they need the 5th day might sometimes feel like a burden or this is how am I supposed to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish with you here kind of experience. And so I'm just wondering if there's someone separate that would be highly qualified that could be loaded with the responsibility of those students that do opt in on that 5th day because of either their circumstances or their specific needs, so that the teachers are still able to accomplish what they're wanting to accomplish with this request. I don't know whether Dr. Christensen or Leah or who might be able to respond to that, but I'm concerned about the opt-in for those who may, and maybe there are none, but if there were some, I would hate for them to feel like, okay, well, we need to go, but really the teachers don't want us here at this moment.
That's a thoughtful question. Dr. Christensen, can you respond to that, please?
You bet. So we have definitely thought through all of that, and there will be a person at each campus that oversees the optional 5th day. We have created a rotating schedule of teachers who will be responsible for providing instruction on those 5th days when students choose to attend, but actually they're pretty excited, the teachers are, to be able to have that schedule where they know when they will be required to do it, but the rest of the Fridays they're not, and can participate in planning time or in our professional development. So a schedule has already been drawn up, a potential schedule, and a person designated at each campus.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm not seeing other committee hands, but I do have a couple of questions. The percentages were in the discussion, but not the numbers, just to get a picture of this. So how many students are we talking about 85? And we're talking about all students, even though 85 plus have IEPs. This would apply to all students. So how many total students are you saying have IEPs that's in Spectrum? Dr. Christensen.
Sorry, I was muted. 1,300 students.
So a total of 1,300. So that's 1,000 IEPs, or 1,300 that Leah is saying will have to be reviewed pretty quickly. Dr. Voorhees is saying will need to be reviewed pretty quickly to make sure that all of them are satisfied with the change in scheduling. So that's a pretty big commitment, but if you've thought about that, then we'll assume you're up to it, and I won't belabor that. I had another question about the, would you explain to me, Dr. Christensen, what's the optional day? What's it going to look like in a school? What do you envision would be happening? And this kind of goes to Randy's question about, are students going to feel welcome there if they choose to go there? And will there be a teacher in every classroom? How's that going to look in terms of being optional?
Sure. We have a variety of STEM-related activities that are going to be planned throughout the year for those students to participate in on Fridays that do come, as well as students will be invited that through our progress monitoring efforts, we're seeing need a little bit more intervention time in reading and math. We do have several paraprofessionals that will be staffing, but we will also have, like I said earlier, designated licensed teachers that will be over and supervising that instruction on a rotating basis. So we, I think, do a pretty good job as far as helping our students to feel welcome and that positive environment. And at least the things that I have heard, those teachers have expressed excitement and interest in being able to plan some different STEM activities that they specialize in, that they can have a good hands-on time experience with those kiddos. So
will the students be in their, will the teachers be in their classrooms then on that optional day?
they will, and all of they, depending on the activity that's going on. So we may be able to move them, all the students that are in attendance to the high school gym for their maker spaces or whatever they're going to be doing at that time. And the other teachers in the other buildings will not have students in those buildings. So it's going to depend on the activity a little bit.
Okay. And will there be adequate aides and paras? And have you thought through how that's going to work and how your employment staffing will look?
Yes, on those Fridays, we have a significant amount of paraprofessionals. So in order to keep them gainfully employed and busy, it's going to be really important that they do have that Friday opportunity to work with our students. And we would have sufficient staffing on Fridays with that.
Okay. Still not seeing any other committee hands. I've always really respected Spectrum and the work you do. It's in my mind the very best kind of charter school with a very clear focus and specific focus, and you've just demonstrated really good work with in some cases difficult situations. On the other hand, I'm pretty old school. I believe that students are better in school. I think that's just for me in classrooms. I think that's my own opinion. So this makes me really nervous. This is also the first kind of a waiver that has been contemplated that is not about just learning in a different place. Some waivers that have to do with certain college related charter schools, and then also the other waivers are about remote locations where it just doesn't, it's very difficult for the families to get there and the teachers to get there. And this is more of a convenience, and for lack of immediately a better word, convenience and work preference situation. And it makes me a little uncomfortable when these students are those who most need, I believe, school. So I'm just really nervous about starting down this road with waiving days of school. On the other hand, you've thought through it carefully, and on the fifth hand, you have support from your community. I'm wondering if, in an informal way, without making this necessarily a motion or an amendment or anything else, but we could have, because typically these schools don't come back to us, these schools who request waivers, I think it's every 2 years or 3 years. Do you remember AAGBL, how often this would come back for the board's review, the committee's review?
It would review at the end of 2024 and 2025. So it would be good for 3 school years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I wondered if we could, and this would cause, I guess, Ashley to sort of keep track this and just have an update discussion in a year would be my hope, and see how this is going, and perhaps some kind of a analysis of school, the students' success, because that's what this is about. It's not about teacher convenience. It's not about saving money. It's about, is this good for kids in whatever type of school they're in? So that's sort of a preference that I would express, not, again, making this motion. And I do see I stalled long enough. Member Hymas, do you have a question or a statement?
I just have a statement. I want to speak up in behalf of Spectrum Academy. I was fortunate enough to be present at the State Charter School Board meeting where they presented to the State Charter School Board. Sorry, we can see in our backup documents that the State Charter School Board supported this. Spectrum did a great job. They have planned out things that we were not aware of. I think that even us sitting here now do not see as much as they see, of course, within their field of teaching these particular students. I do at the same time have similar reservations and concerns that were brought up by Chair Lear, but and I agree that I would love to hear back within a year or so to see how this is going, not as a we're going to shut you down thing, but let's look at this and see if it's successful. So I thank Spectrum Academy for their thinking differently and wanting to take different approaches and seeing what they can do, what's best for their kids and their community. And I support this, and I'm happy to make a motion, but we'll hear from Cindy or Member Davis before I do any action.
I'd really like to thank you for those comments. Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize for missing the first few minutes of the presentation. So if what I say is superfluous to what's been said or asked, I apologize. I just want to double check. I read in your presentation that the students still will be in school over the 990 hours. And so you're extending Monday through Thursday from what they currently do already. Am I understanding that right? And then,
Yes.
I personally feel like we should, in our own board rules, do either 990 or the 180. But I know, just as I say that, people are cringing because there's all these different things and formulas and things that would have unintended consequences. I really like the idea of revisiting this in a year. And what I would like to know when we come back is I'd like to know if you had any fluctuations in achievement data or if that sort of stayed the same. I'd like to know what percentage of students were utilizing the 5th day option. And I'd like to know one, and this is one, I'd like to know what the teacher-student ratio has been on average over the 5th day option. And then I have a question for you right now, and maybe you've already talked about this. What is your current teacher-student ratio on average at Spectrum?
It depends on the grade. In the lower grades, it's 12 to 15 students with a teacher and a paraprofessional. So 6 to 7 to 1 ratio. In the older grades, 15 to 18 students with a teacher and a paraprofessional.
Okay. So, but honestly, I don't think that's actually better odds than what a lot of our other schools have as far as special education goes. So the IEP demand is not as compelling for me to support something like this, but the behavior intervention plan might be, because you may be experiencing greater demands as far as keeping up with FUBAs and BIPs and the constant 2-week reviews and all of that, more so than some of our other schools. So that's the thing that could tip the scale for me on this. And I really appreciate all that Spectrum does. I met with I went to California with one of your directors, and she was such a bright light. I just loved learning from her and about the work that you do. So I'm supportive of this at this time and would love to revisit and explore really what's happening with it in a year from now, if that's okay. If everyone votes for that.
Thank you, Cindy, and thanks, Jamie, for being so responsive. Randy.
Just one more quick question. So when they come together on the Fridays for the STEM activities, will all grade levels be gathered together in the gym, and the teacher will be supervising the youngers and the olders all at the same time, with paraprofessionals taking care of the individual needs at the various level?
The answer to that is a big no. They definitely will be separated out with elementary versus secondary grades.
Great, thank you very much.
And we'll come back to you one more minute, Matt, for that motion. Here are the things I wrote down, Ashley, and maybe you did this too, that we would like to look at in a year. And I don't know if that requires a motion. Does somebody want to give me some kind of a legal, Angie, does that require a motion, do you think, for us to review this in a year instead of 3 years?
It doesn't require that, but it also wouldn't help. So hurt. So
Okay.
if you would like me to, I can draft that motion for you. So
That'd be just great. And then Matt, maybe, because everybody seemed to agree with that, Matt could add it to his motion. Let me just note the things, though, that we would like to hear about in a year. The student achievement data, the percent of students attending on the 5th day. And then a couple of these, one of these I had it in on my own. Teacher retention. If one of your reasons for requesting this is teacher retention and job culture, information about that. Number 4, confirmation that all IEPs were reviewed. A year's obviously too long for that to happen, but realistically, that's the first time I think this committee would have a chance to review it. And then I think another, number 5 would be another family student, however, whatever your polling was, to say that your school community supports this. So that would be a 5th item. And then the last item would be a review or a comment from Dr. Voorhees from the state special ed perspective. Does this still seem consistent with IDEA? those are the 6 items that I noted, and we can put those in writing for you. Member Davis?
Just one more little one. I would really be interested on average to know what the teacher-student ratio is on those fifth optional days.
Okay.
Just average for the year.
Ratio on 5th day. Okay. Okay. Does that seem, Matt, did you have another comment before your motion?
I just had a question for the committee members here. The waiver is for 3 years. And I would like to keep it for 3 years, but it sounds like we want to, that some committee members want to change it to a 1 year pending the results of these questions. Can I get some clarification on that?
I can speak for myself. I'm still looking at a presumptive 3-year waiver. I just want a report back in a year, which then would, I guess if the situation had deteriorated or changed dramatically, that would maybe prompt me to act or do something. But I don't think that now. I'm still going with a presumption of a 3-year waiver. I can't speak for anybody else. Cindy, did you have a comment to that?
Not really. I mean, there was some concern, like safety was in question because there were 50 kids to one teacher, on the extra days or something in jeopardy. I mean, the thing that makes me feel more comfortable with doing this for 3 years is that we still have the 990 hours of education happening.
That's a good point. Angie, you had your hand up.
I was just going to state that I believe, and Ashley, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but R277121 actually states that a school who requests a waiver may be requested to report annually to the board. So either verbally or in a written format. So that would be consistent. I think in this case, you're just proactively stating to Spectrum Academy that we will be requesting you to come back in a year and giving them a heads up of some of the issues you'd like them to be prepared to report on. So that's what I would just say it's not out of, it's not an unreasonable expectation, since the rule already states that those who request should provide an annual report if requested.
Thank you. Thanks for calling that to our attention. These are our most vulnerable students. And I think, as I said earlier and meant, Spectrum does a fabulous job of serving them. But I want to be really aware, since this is a first for this kind of a waiver, I want to be very timely in terms of responding and not wait 3 years. Randy?
I just wanted to express my confidence in Dr. Christensen and her team and the work that they've already done in preparation for making this request. I'm confident that we won't find in a year's time that there were 50 to 1 and they're going to deal with whatever it is that they need to deal with. But I am very interested, and I share the concerns that have been expressed. So it would be great to have a report in a year. And I don't think it needs to be a burdensome, let's fill out the paper and cross all the T's. I would be very happy with a verbal report that would give us the information that we're requesting, just so that I want Spectrum and I want all of the charters and LEAs across the state to know that we are invested as they are, and we take very seriously with them the responsibility of taking care of each child and their education. So we're just wanting to be good stewards and be supportive of students and of the administrators and teachers across the state who are finding new ways to accomplish the good things that they're trying to do with their students. Thank you.
And Dr. Christensen, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate all of those comments. I did just want to get on for the record. I know that it was stated that this is something of a convenience, and it's really it's more than that. And I just want you to understand that our teachers are having to prepare all the IEPs and all the behavior intervention plans and all the specially designed instruction within the context of their current day. So students are missing out on that instruction during the time that they're having to plan all these things. And our thought process is not just teacher retention, although that's a big piece. It's, can we concentrate and have better instruction in those 4 days, where then teachers have some time on the Fridays to accomplish all of this paperwork, instead of it being disjointed throughout the week when they're having to attend the IEP meetings and prepare the IEPs and take all of that data. So our whole focus is always certainly student progress. And this may be something I think we would be remiss if we did not say, and I want to communicate on behalf of Spectrum Academy, we want to revisit this with you in a year's time. We want to revisit it on a monthly basis, on a regular basis, to say, is this something that is working, and is it what's a benefit to our students? Because if it's not, we don't want to continue.
Thank you. And that's happened with some of these waivers. A couple of, for different reasons, school districts have changed their mind, and schools have changed their mind about that. So thank you. And thank you. And convenience was my word, and I apologize. That wasn't exactly what I meant. But I think your explanation is very helpful. Ashley, did you have something else to add?
I was just going to reiterate from Angie that yes, under the rule, you guys do have the authority to review every year, but also just that there isn't a set time limit of 3 years. That's kind of the standard that's been used for approving a waiver, but it's not in the rule that it has to be like that set number of years. So if you guys prefer that it be 2 years or 4 years, that can always be adjusted in the agreement between USB and Spectrum as well.
And I'm fine with the presumption of 3, as long as we have that review. And I'd also urge you, Dr. Christensen, that Dr. Voorhees has great staff and resources. And I would really urge you to keep her in your, and her department in your communications, so that when she comes back in a year, that she will feel comfortable with the information she provides. Because I mean, speaking for myself, I trust her immensely and her evaluation of these things. Ashley, you still had your hand up. Did I cut you off?
No, sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Okay. And Member Hymas, comment, and then a motion. I think we've had, I don't see any more hands.
I'm ready for a motion. I just want to make sure that with the annual reporting, we don't need to add anything to the motion. We're good to go as is.
Well, Angie's point was earlier, Angie Stallings suggested that a motion could be included with that. And it might be helpful. We may have a change of board members. So I would suggest, if you're comfortable with it, a motion that includes a review on the items identified by the committee in 1 year.
Board Member Lear, I've drafted a motion. I don't know if you can see that on the screen.
Oh, there you go, Matt.
There's got the recommended action, which is the motion that's in the agendas, the first one, and then I put a potential additional motion if wanted.
So Matt, can you
let me take a stab at it here. I'm going to first do the recommended action and then add the addition. So I move that the committee forward a recommendation to the board to waive the requirements in R277-419 pupil accounting of 180 days per school year for Spectrum Academy.
Board Member Hymas, I apologize, Board Member Lear. I would recommend actually we keep the two motions separate, only because the one motion the board will act on. The second motion, the board will not need to act on. It's a committee direction or direct.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I would recommend we keep the two motions separate.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay.
Great. So
So the first one then, can I remove the first motion and then first move that the committee directs staff to request Spectrum Academy to report back to the Law and Licensing Committee in 1 year, including the following information: student achievement information, the percentage of the school's students attending on the 5th day, including the teacher-student ratio of those in attendance on Fridays, teacher retention data, the school's progress to review student IEPs, information on family and student feedback on the 4-day schedule, and input from special education staff on the school's progress with the waiver.
thank you. And so that doesn't need to be voted on either. And Angie, is that right? Or should we vote on that?
And you vote on it. It just would formalize it in the minutes.
Okay. Then the motion is that the committee directs staff to request Spectrum Academy to report back to the Law and Licensing Committee in 1 year with the following information. At least the following information, if it's okay if I make that point. Not that we'll overburden them. Student achievement information, the percentage of the school students attending on the 5th day, including student teacher ratio of those in attendance on the 5th day, teacher retention data, the school's progress to review student IEPs, information on family student feedback on the 4-day schedule, and input from USB special education staff on the school's progress with the waiver. And so that's the motion. Would committee members please vote? And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes in favor on that staff direction. Thank you for that. Matt, would you like to make the further motion?
Sure. I move that the committee forward a recommendation to the board to waive the requirements in R277-419 pupil accounting of 180 days per school year for Spectrum Academy.
Any further discussion to that motion? I don't see any. The motion is the committee forward, or I should do this first. The motion is the committee forward a recommendation to the board to waive the requirement in R277-419 pupil accounting of 180 days per school year for Spectrum Academy. All in favor of that motion, please. Will everyone please vote? And I also see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes in favor of that motion. So unanimous. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Christensen. Leah, thank you for your expertise and thanks for help with the logistics. And good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on, we have item number 2, which is R277-410, the accreditation of schools, just a continuation. I think that, is it Jennifer? That's Jennifer Throgson.
It's actually Rachel
Okay.
Coolidge, who's
Rachel.
also on.
College or Coolidge? Rachel will speak to this. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Rachel College, Educational Leadership Specialist.
Okay.
And so
go ahead.
this is just a request for a continuation of R277-410, the accreditation of schools.
Okay, and anything else you'd like to tell us about that might further our knowledge?
Not at this time.
Okay. Any questions by committee members? I don't see any hands raised. Somebody like to make a motion? It's available there at the bottom of your screen, or in the middle. Please, Member Davis.
Sorry, I will make a motion, but
Okay,
I did have something to say.
all right, please, go ahead.
So I just want to make it really clear, so we aren't miscommunicating to the public. We have had these external bodies accrediting our schools. We've never had in-house accreditation accrediting our schools. we, like a year or two ago, had a massive task force isn't the right word, but working group. And I attended those meetings, and the LEAs wanted to move this in-house. They wanted to move this in-house, and we tried to do that through the Standards and Assessment Committee, and we couldn't get out of Standards and Assessment Committee. I even called the members and I said, look, everybody wants to move this, but they said, we value this outside perspective. So I'm hearing these kind of rumblings of the history that are inaccurate, and I want to make sure that we have a really clear understanding of process and what's happened prior to this. And the reason that this rule is coming back to continue is because we spent hours and hours and hours and hours looking at changing it, and nobody wanted to change it on the Standards and Assessment Committee, not a single one of them. So I just really think that needs to be made clear and understanding when we're communicating with the people. And I can go ahead and make the motion. It looks like Board Member Klein has some comments.
Yes, she does. Before that motion, Member Klein.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was trying to switch rooms. I had a crying baby and I couldn't hear the first part of the conversation. So I apologize. I'm not sure exactly what's already been said, but I did have some questions about this. First, I don't know if staff can say, who are these outside accrediting agencies that our schools are using? Do we know?
Thank you, Board Member Klein. Sorry, Cognia is the outside agency that we utilize to accredit the schools.
Okay, that was my concern. I've studied Cognia. I've posted about it previously to this and looked them up, and there's a video where they explain what their focus is, and it's all equity, culture, prejudice, bias, discrimination, commitment to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so my concern is that we are using an accreditation company that is requiring our schools to implement the very things that we have said our schools can't do through R277-328. So my proposal would be to make an amendment. I don't know, we don't have an amendment on the table yet, correct?
No.
Or a motion?
No.
Okay.
No motion, no amendments, anything.
Okay, so on line 11, I don't know if they have that, if they can pull that up. But line 11, sorry.
Natalie, I have to interrupt you. Oh my gosh. Hang on a sec. Ashley or AGB or Angie Stallings can correct me, but this was advertised as a continuation only. Does that still allow us to amend this?
Yeah, you still could create, I believe that the Open and Public Meetings Act would allow you to still amend it, even though it's just a continuation.
Helpful. Thank you. That's all I want to know. Go ahead.
Okay, so before I make that motion, I did have one more question. On line 29, it says that we have, I don't know if you can go to that. Is somebody scrolling?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I had paused.
Okay,
so it says in addition to standards set by an accrediting body. So basically it's saying that Cognia has their own standards and then we have ours and we use both, where the school uses both. And so I'm curious, what are the standards? Do we know what Cognia standards are? And if not, why are we ceding that responsibility when it's our job to set the standards?
I'm not sure if I should go to Deputy Stallings or Rachel.
I'd say Rachel first, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yes, Cognia does have standards, and so they have a set of standards that when the schools are being accredited, they are providing evidence toward those standards. They also have expressed that they are very responsive to the local school and what the school will set, their curriculum. The school is the one that's going to set a lot of their focus areas, but they do have standards that are measured up against when they're going through accreditation.
Do we have a copy of those standards somewhere? Are we aware of what those standards are and if they're in conflict with ours or any of our
Sure.
rules?
I can certainly.
Rachel, may I add?
Sure.
Right, Jennifer, just one second. Rachel was in the middle of a sentence and then I'll go to you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We do have a copy of those standards. Those standards are online with Cognia, and I'm happy to share those in the best way that would be helpful.
Thank you. And then Director Thronson is in an awkward Zoom location, but she just would like to speak also. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair Lear. And just to speak to those standards, they were recently updated or are coming to be updated. And so Rachel was asked to review those standards in coordination with our 277328 and other code and rules to ensure that they didn't violate any of our local rules or laws. And so that has been conducted and we did not find any issues in that space, specifically with those standards. So we can certainly share them, but I do want you to know that because they were being updated, we did take a thorough review of those standards to ensure usability in Utah.
And what you're saying, Jennifer, is there are no conflicts between Cognia standards and Utah standards, including the most recent version of our 277328. Is that right?
Correct. And Rachel can speak more. She did the work, but from her analysis, we didn't find any issues.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Natalie. That was your one question. Cindy has a question too, but go ahead if you have another question, Natalie.
Well, can Cognia update their standards at any time without us being aware? And are there those standards I think should be available as well to the public.
And
so
they are.
know.
Go ahead, either Rachel or Jennifer, whoever.
So my understanding is that they update their standards. They continually look at them, but they don't update them fully. I want to say it's about a 5-year cycle that they update them. And so I don't know. I don't believe they would just be updating them, all the time. I think they're reviewing them, but the formal update would be, I believe, 5 years.
Okay.
And so accreditation, does that, in order for a school to be accredited by them, does that require that the school adhere to their standards as well as ours?
So there's a review process where the standards are looked over and the school provides evidence toward those standards, but then, so they do, and then the team looks at their evidence and gives a rating of sorts of where they are in that, but they do have a pretty strong emphasis on the local community and the what the school or the system, what if the entire system, like a district, is being accredited, what their focus areas are, what their curriculum is, what they define as important aspects in their local community. So I would say from my experience with them, it's been a balance.
Great. Jennifer, did you have anything to add? Director Thonson?
No, I think Rachel did a great job. They notify us as a partner if they change the standards, and they actually gave us advance notice. The standards haven't changed yet. They're not changing, I think, until next year. So it's an ongoing work.
Right.
Will we be informed when that happens?
We've already been informed. That's what I was trying to communicate. That they've sent
when the new standards come out?
Just a sec.
They've already come out, and they go into effect next year.
Oh,
There
okay.
are new standards. They go into effect next year. Okay. Were those your questions?
Those are my questions. So I'm ready to make a motion unless Cindy wants to make a comment.
Ahead of you in terms of the motion, I was just deferring to you to see if there were additional questions. So, but now her hand is up, and I'm not sure if it's for a question or for that motion that she'd already said she'd like to make. Go ahead, Cindy.
I don't really care about the order of things. I was just thinking that whatever Cognia puts on their website as their standards does not mean that that is what they will implement in Utah, specifically if something in those standards would, for example, violate 328. So I'm wondering if, to make this more clear, so everybody's on the same page for communication, in line 29, that instead of the way it reads, it would read, the superintendent shall establish Utah-specific assurances demonstrating compliance with state law and board rule to be followed by the accrediting body. Now, that just means that the accrediting body will be responsible to follow Utah code and board rule, and that we will be checking for compliance on that. Now they're going to have a lot of things, you know, literacy rates and all these things. And we don't need to sit here and wordsmith all that. I don't care about that. What I care about is that any group that comes into Utah schools is following also Utah state code and board rule. So I think that a motion of that nature would clarify, sounds like what I'm hearing Board Member Klein saying. So that would be a suggestion, a language suggestion for me. For
Is that a motion, Cindy?
Board Member Klein, does that accomplish what you're thinking about, what your concern is?
Natalie?
Yeah, I think that does a good job at moving us in the right direction, for sure.
Okay.
I can tell you what my motion was, and then we can, what's going to be, and you can decide if that is needed or not.
In the interest of simplicity, let's go with this. And then if you have a comment or want to make an amendment to this motion, then we'll go in that order, if that's okay.
Okay.
So you need me. So I move that line 29 through 31 reads, the superintendent shall establish Utah-specific assurances demonstrating compliance with state law and board rule to be followed by the accrediting body.
So you would delete the first phrase before the comma. Is that right, Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, Ange, can you show that? Thank you. So the motion is that the superintendent shall establish on lines 29 and 31 through 31 in R277410, the superintendent shall establish Utah-specific assurances demonstrating compliance with state law and board rule to be followed by the accrediting body. Any discussion to that motion? Member Klein? Natalie, did you have?
No, I don't have any comment.
Okay, thank you. Your hand was up.
Oh, sorry.
So then I just restated the motion. Will the committee please vote on the motion to amend? And I see 5 votes in favor. So the rule is amended. Now, would anybody like to make a further motion to either a different amendment or to continue the rule? Member Davis, your check is up. I'm taking that as a hand to make a motion.
It can be, if that's what we're ready for.
I'm reaching.
Can we scroll back up to the main motion or go back to the main motion?
Thank you. Angie, I think that's a request for you.
Yes, just 1 minute. I'm trying to get there.
Okay, and while you're scrolling, I just want to reiterate that, we had tried to move this so we had more, autonomy over accreditation, and it had zero support from each member in the Standards and Assessment Committee. Never got out. So we are now in this system with an outside body, but I certainly think we can communicate with these outside bodies and expect them to adhere to our state rule and code.
And that is now true for in the rule. So go ahead, Member Davis, with your motion.
I move that the committee continue R277-410 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation on second and final reading.
The motion is that the committee continue R277-410 on first reading and forward as amended. I hope that's okay.
Guys, we need the motion, and I was trying to hurry and draft it, and it's just so many screens. It should be that the committee continue and approve R277-410 draft 1 on
As-
first reading.
Oh,
And
okay.
and because we now created a draft 1 with the amendment.
so
So
you
it
don't need to
needs
say
to
as
continue
amended.
and approve.
So let me try again, that the committee continue and approve R277-410 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation
And approval.
and approval on second and final reading.
So moved.
Thank you. And committee members, any further discussion, any final discussion? I'm seeing none. Would you please vote? And I see 5 favorable votes. That is moved on to the board. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is R277-605, coaching standards and athletic clinics with some amendments. Ben Rasmussen and Jody Parker, who would like to begin?
I would be happy to, Chair. Thank you.
Please.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. Happy to be with you this morning. The recommendations on 605 were started by feedback that Director Parker received from the High School Activities Association. There was a concern that there should be some beefed up requirements for training for coaches that are working with students that might be at risk of injury. And so if you go down to the bottom of the rule, Angie, the initial changes were made to clarify what training is required for coaches. And so you can see on line 60 through 70 that we've added a requirement for CPR and first aid training for coaches, and then also reiterated some other requirements that are required for coaches and required LEAs to maintain verification of their compliance with this rule. We got some feedback in the process of after we posted this rule, asking about what the scope of the rule would be. And so we posted draft 2 to try and attempt to clarify what the proposal would be. You'll see those changes are made in blue and red. We wanted to clarify specifically with the training that's required for students that would be at risk of physical injury. The athletic coaches would be the ones that need to have those, but not necessarily a debate coach or a choir coach wouldn't need to have CPR training. But we did want to clarify in the rule that this would apply to coaches involved in any extracurricular activity. So you'll see that we've tried to address that throughout the changes in draft 2. And Angie, if you can move to the definition of coach in
Yes.
the definitions section.
Thank
We
you.
also received some questions from Chair Lear about what the scope of coach actually should be. And after talking about this and getting feedback from UHSAA, we made a couple adjustments there. The feeling is this should be broad and should address anyone who's actually independently working with students. And so that would include volunteers, that would include assistant coaches or coaches, basically anybody who's supervising students on behalf of the LEA. The hope is that would be encompassed in the definition of coach. And so we've adjusted the language on line 20 and 21 to capture that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Jody Parker is also here to assist in answering questions as well.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Natalie, I see your hand, but let me see if Jody Parker, who's the specialist in this area, has anything to add. Jody, anything?
The only thing I would add is I did take the first draft of this rule to UHSAA last month to the executive committee, and they were very favorable. They also very much appreciate that we define approved provider that gives consistency between our LEAs that participate in any kind of extracurricular activity, athletics specifically for American Heart, American Red Cross, American Safety, and National Safety Council. Those are all accepted as premier providers. And then we also want it to be hands-on. So you don't get to watch a YouTube video and be CPR certified and expected to be safe for our children. So that was a clarification that they very much appreciated. And then I did also send this newer draft back to UHSAA, and they also very much appreciate that it's independently supervisors, because they wanted to make sure that we captured the volunteer coaches that are responsible for students not under direct supervision of a paid coach within our schools. So I would just add that additional piece that and not all athletics are under UHSAA. Our middle school, junior high sports are under UHSAA, and many of our charter schools don't participate in UHSAA. So this would cover all students at all levels that are participating in any kind of extracurricular activity, to make sure that the adults supervising them have adequate training that make them safe, both physically, our first aid and CPR, as well as the other trainings like the bully hazing and the child abuse prevention trainings.
So did I hear you correctly? And Natalie, I still see your hand, but I just wanted clarification in Jody's comment. Did I hear you say then this would apply to any sport that is sponsored by, or I'm just wondering where things like how it applies to things like water polo or biking clubs or biking activities.
We've tried to make this apply to any extracurricular activity, whether or not it's sponsored by UHSAA. So yes, if the school sponsors those, they should be covered.
Right, but it's on behalf of an LEA. So if there's a non-curricular biking club, mountain biking club, would those coaches or sponsors be covered?
I think if the LEA sponsors the activity and provides the faculty advisor, that faculty advisor would need to be trained. But if it's just something that, I think that would be the impetus, is whether or not the LEA sponsors the activity.
Okay, we may have to clarify that. Hold that thought. Natalie?
Yeah, I was just wanted some clarification as well. Are all of these independently supervised, or these individuals that are supervising these students, did they have a name before, before we started calling them coach?
I'm sorry, I'm not, maybe Ben understood your question. Did you, Ben?
So you're asking if they had to get this training before?
No, we're going to call them all coaches now. Were they called something before, something else, or is it just a new term, a new broad umbrella that everyone's going to fall under?
And Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of these right now are considered assistant coaches, or they have coaching titles, but they're unpaid or in volunteer positions. This is specifically for people who independently work with students, and so most of those are like assistant coaches.
Okay, so would that include school clubs or after school activities?
I think if that's the point that we're focused on right now. And Ben's language was sponsored by an LEA, which might be some clubs, which would be clubs, as I understand it, if LEAs participate in those, in like he said, having advisors, using school equipment, using school facilities, calling themselves the Morgan mountain bikers, Morgan High mountain bikers, those kinds of indicia. Maybe Matt can add something to it. I'm leaning toward an amendment that says sponsored by instead of on behalf of, so it would be clearer. But Matt, please contribute.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking of the various different roles that a extracurricular program has. something like even a teen mom, right, who might show up and hang out on the bench, or, you know, I don't know how far this goes, Ben, as far as training people who are involved there. And then the other thing, if I could do it like a two-part, when we start getting into clubs, you know, that it really depends on what kind of club, right? We're not going to have a Lego club advisor go through all this, or a robotics club advisor go through all this. I don't believe that that's the intent of this rule. And so it's just a little bit of clarity on there. If it's in there and I missed it, I apologize. But yeah, it's I feel like it's kind of slipping into a lot of different unknowns.
I agree. I was going to add for Natalie's question that a lot of these people are called advisors instead of coaches. And it may vary from that depending on the school. Jody, would you like to provide some helpful information?
Yes, please, if I may. And I realize I did not introduce myself. I am Jody Parker. I am the Health and Physical Education Specialist at the Utah State Board of Education.
Thank you.
I realized after I was done speaking that I didn't. So this rule as a whole isn't new. If you look down in section, sorry, can I scroll up? Now 4, it used to be 3. There's a lot that already talks about what coaches are, and coaches are designated school leaders responsible for a student as long as the student remains on school grounds following a school sponsored activity subject to LAA policy consistent with this rule. So that's already been that's already existed. And then board member Hymas just pointed out that we wouldn't ask someone in like chess club, for example, and you're 100% right. Section 6 outlines that only the child sexual abuse prevention, bully, cyberbullying, and hazing would be for anyone under definition of this new definition of coach. Athletic coaches only need to do the high quality hands-on CPR and concussion and head injury trainings. So only those athletic events which do have are more susceptible to physical injury need to have the CPR, first aid, and head injury. But any adult working with our students in an extracurricular after school, or it could be before school situation would need these additional ones. And then as far as a parent, if the parent is under supervision of a coach, and this already exists in the UHSA bylaws, so we kind of stole a lot of their language. Any person that is a volunteer that is under supervision of another coach at all times, so they're never left alone with the students, they don't need to undergo all of these trainings. It can get rather expensive to have every volunteer parent that comes and does a pitching training for one day, or any skill, right? There's any number of skills. You think of a track team, and there's hundreds of athletes, and there's multiple events, and you might have a parent that has a very specialized skill in one thing, and they'll come and do a one-day event. They're under supervision of a coach. In that case, they're not required to undergo this training because the coach is always there. Now, if that parent instead comes multiple days and they're taking those students into the weight room and they're unsupervised, they are 100% fully expected to undergo all of these requirements, because now they are responsible for our students' safety and well-being.
Well, that's just a different way of saying they're independently supervised.
Yes,
Matt, does that help you some?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jody, for that explanation. I wanted to go back to line 34, though. Can you scroll? There you go. Whoa, a little bit. So, at all times, while on school-sponsored activities, including on the field court or the in locker rooms, eating established lunch, and while traveling, coaches are responsible for a student as long as the student remains on school grounds following a school-sponsored activity subject to LAA policy. I just want to make sure those of you who were in the drafting and I know this is old language, but this doesn't suggest that if they're also responsible for students who are at the University of Utah playing a final game. Is that included in this section? Would you say, Ben? And
Yeah, because it says while traveling. You may remember we had extensive discussion on that specific provision about a year ago when we last amended this rule. And we talked about that. But I do think that would apply because it says while traveling. And so when they've gone to offsite locations, I think that would encompass that.
And I think the point of, now that I'm reading this again, line 35, the point is until those students are picked up by parents, the coaches or designated school leaders are responsible, is the point of that. Not just to say that they are not responsible at other locations where they might be having these activities. Are we all comfortable that this is now adequately defined, or any other thoughts about this? Not seeing any other hands. Would somebody like to make a motion? And
I'll make the motion if you put it on the screen.
that'll be great. Thank you, Natalie. There it is. Thank you.
All right, so I move that the committee approves R277605 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. The motion is that the committee approves R277-605 draft 2 on first reading forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further discussion to that? Thanks for the great explanation by staff. Would committee members please vote? Oh my gosh, I'm seeing 5 votes in the affirmative. Thank you very much. I think we slogged our way through that one. The next item on the agenda is an action item R277302, an amendment to Educator licensing renewal. We have Malia Height and Ben Rasmussen. Whichever of you would like to go first.
I will start us out, and then Malia can jump in and answer questions, if that's all right. So with R277302, there are basically 2 substantive changes that we're making to this rule, in addition to a few other technical changes. But the first of the substantive changes deals with renewal of an LEA specific license. You can see the proposed language here on lines 89 through 97. What is being proposed is that if an LEA requests renewal of an LEA specific license, the individual has to comply with the LEA's policies. The individual has to do 60 hours of professional learning over the 3-year period, like any other licensed educator would have to do. And then they have to complete the ethics review and the background monitoring. This follows up on the changes we made in 301 last month to clarify how LEA specific renewals would be handled. The other change that's being made deals with the terminology used in the license, the professional learning credits. And that is that after getting feedback from stakeholders and talking to groups, the licensing staff is recommending that the terminology be changed from points to hours. And so you will see that throughout section 7 and throughout other parts of the rule, with one exception, we've changed points to hours. Now, the one section that deals with grandfathered licenses under the old system, we've left that points, just in that unique circumstance. But because of the way that the points were calculated, I think staff felt like hours would be the better terminology to use there. So those are the 2 major changes that are being made in R277302. And like I said, the Director Height is here and would be happy to answer questions you may have.
That's perfect. Malia, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, and this is Malia Height, Educator Licensing Coordinator. is that these recommendations have come from the LAG group, which is the Licensing Applied Guidance Group, and has received feedback from all varieties of stakeholders statewide.
Great, helpful. I see that Dr. Dixon is raising her hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will happily defer to board members first. My question is I actually have a question for Malia about hours versus points.
Oh, yeah, we had a little discussion of that ourselves. Member Davis.
I'll follow up offline, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Cindy, did you have a question or thought?
Yeah, I just seeking a little bit of clarification. I was just wondering why there's a provision for educators who do not have a current assignment in an LEA to renew an LEA specific license. Isn't there already a requirement that you must have an assignment in a current LEA to even be working under an LEA specific license?
Where are you referring to?
The one that was just up on the screen a minute ago that says an educator without a current specific assignment.
That's under the grandfathered clause.
Yeah,
That doesn't apply to the LEA specific.
It doesn't, so we don't need to worry about that.
Right.
Okay.
The LEA specific has a separate requirement in 301 that they have to maintain employment with the LEA. And so that's designated educators with a professional or associate license that are able to renew their license without a position.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for other hands. Cindy, did you get your issues resolved? Yes. In that vein, thank you for those explanations. Randy, Member Booth. You're muted.
Randy, you're muted. Member Booth.
I have a motion if you're ready.
Please, that would be lovely. Go ahead.
I move that the committee approves R277-302 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
The motion is that the committee approves R277-302 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further discussion? Thank you for so ably answering our questions.
Superintendent raised her hand, Chair.
Dr. Dixon, back again, I see.
Sorry, this is to the motion, and I apologize. This is the challenge of jumping among three meetings.
Do not apologize. We're glad to have your expertise.
I'm kind of stuck on the unintended consequences of the language. I know that you discussed 1 point equals 1 hour. And so you're going back to the language of hours, but I'm wondering, as we're trying to move into more of competency based for both students and teachers, just wondering if you discussed the unintended consequences of changing language that now looks like we're back to seat time, instead of changing the structure behind the scenes with points. So thinking about competency versus seat time, and just wanting to make sure that you discuss the unintended consequences of what that might mean for competencies being stuck with hours.
Malia, would you like to speak to that?
Happy to. This is certainly something that we've talked about. One of the challenges with the point system is that activities were given points, but there was not a very consistent value that was associated with any kind of competency. And so this whole entire renewal rule puts the responsibility on local administrators to determine whether or not an educator has completed sufficient renewal activities for their renewal. And there actually is a provision, and it's higher in the rule, that says if an individual is completing all of their professional learning and their collaboration activities within an employed school year, then they are earning all of those 20 hours just by virtue of doing their job.
Dr. Dixon?
Thank you.
Did that do it for you?
Yeah, that's helpful. I just want to make sure LEAs have flexibility and that competencies can be used to renew. Thank you.
I just taking a privilege of making a comment. I am always conflicted about the benefits variously, sometimes about hours and points. And we've tried points for a while, and if you're recommending now we go back to hours, I am willing to do that too. So let's try that. Now I think we're in the, I think we're ready for motion now. Looking.
I can make that.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you, Natalie.
Member Booth already made the motion, Chair.
I
good.
thought so. I was having deja vu for a moment. Thank you. So we have a motion. We had a little bit more discussion. I won't repeat the motion again. Would committee members please vote? And I see 5 votes in the affirmative. Thank you for reminding me of that. We had motion after motion. So thank you. 5 affirmative votes that the rule passes out of committee. And the next item on our agenda is R277-606, Dropout and Recovery Program. We have Jeff Van Holten, Tanya Albornoz. I'll let the two of you decide your.
Jeff is still in Standards and Assessment Committee, I believe.
Yeah, and since neither he or Tanya are here, Chair, Leah and I will do our best to.
Oh, should we skip? Let's move on for a minute. We've got a couple more rules and we can come back.
The 3 remaining rules are all Jeff's, so I'm going to do my best to cover all 4 of the remaining items are Jeff's. So if you don't mind, I'll step in and do my best.
Yep, that's just fine.
So Ben, if you could go ahead and pull up the draft bill or the rule and move to lines 58. This rule is being amended due to the passage of HB 251, which was actually a bill that we requested, the State Board of Education, to eliminate the need for LEAs to contract with a third-party provider if they have certain, graduation rates or a certain number of students who've dropped out of high school. So now the language states that an LEA may or school may contract with a third-party provider. It's not a requirement. So you can see the new language here on lines 58 through 61 that states that the LEA may contract with a third party or create a dropout prevention and recovery services plan. And then also if they create a plan, they then have to report that to USBE, which is later on in the rule. And there was one other word change where it says if an LEA is required, instead it says if an LEA chooses to contract. So really it's just bringing this rule in alignment with the recently passed bill. And Leah Voorhees is Assistant Superintendent of Student Support, is here and could probably answer any questions that Tanya would have normally answered.
Okay, and Dr. Voorhees, anything else to add until we have questions?
No, thank you. Good summary.
And Vice Chair Davis has a question.
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm ready to make a motion. I move the committee approves R277-606 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
And the motion is that the committee approves R277-606 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further final discussion to that motion? Committee members, please vote. And I see 5 votes in the affirmative. Thank you for that very efficient work on the rule. And
thank you.
Thank you. Now the next one is, and we'll count on you again, Angie, item 1.6, an action item R277-911, secondary career and technical education. I'm not sure at what point I should say this, but I think I'll just throw it all in. Well, Angie, maybe you want to go ahead and explain the work on this, and then I can either explain our proposal or you can.
I'd be happy to. So thank you. And also we've got Talia Longhurst and Wendy Morton, who are also in the room, who can answer
Right.
questions if needed. But the rule is up for its 5-year review and continuation. So we do need to take action at least to continue the rule today. I believe the rule has not been updated in quite some time. So you'll notice there are significant changes in the rule, and Ben, you could pull up the rule if you wanted. Jeff Van Holten did forward a document to you, which we will make sure and get uploaded to Civic Clerk if for some reason the committee decides to move this rule to next month. Wendy Morton, I believe, created kind of a summary of the changes to the rule, section by section, to make it a little easier to explain the changes, but you'll see there are quite a few changes here. If you choose to, we could turn some time over to Talia or Wendy to kind of describe the substantive changes throughout the rule. And I know Chair Lear, at one point, another option that was discussed was not taking action on the amendments today, but only moving on the continuation and bringing the amendments back next month. If it would be helpful, I think that, you know, again, Talia or Wendy could give kind of an overview of the substance to prep for next month and answer any questions that board members may have.
I would appreciate that. I don't know that we need to go line by line, but I think it might be helpful. And when we discussed this in our pre-meeting, both Member Booth and myself felt like this was an overwhelming number of changes, and we'd like to have a couple of months to digest it. So I was hoping that we could continue it, but then have a more substantive discussion of the amendments. But I think it would be helpful to have either Talia or Wendy at your discretion, whichever one of you would like to speak, just of an overview of the changes and anything that you might think is especially worth noting.
I'd be happy to go through that, Chair Lear, if you'd like.
Thank you. I'd love you to.
So Talia Longhurst, Director of Career and Technical Education, we appreciate you taking even just a couple of minutes this morning to go through. Let me just start by saying one of the things I've learned in my time here at the office is that rule writing is really an art. And there is a lot that goes into it. And we've listened carefully. If you recall, you've seen a lot of CT rules come before you over the last couple of months. And we've listened carefully to your feedback and to your wishes during those rule revisions as well, and tried to make sure that we incorporate some of those things here. You'll see that there are a number of definitions that have been added. And in fact, a few definitions that were deleted if they were not being used in the rule. So that's why, because in previous CTE rule revisions over the last few months, you've really emphasized the importance of those definitions. And so we tried to be very careful about making sure that those things were outlined clearly in the definitions for you. The rest of the rule, there aren't a lot of substantive changes to what we do in our everyday practice, just more clarity so that you all can understand what happens with CTE and so that the field can understand. For instance, when it comes to to formulas for funding for state CT add-on dollars, we've just tried to be more clear. There isn't a change in practice in how we do that, with a couple of minor exceptions that I'll highlight in a second. But really, it's just about being more clear so that those things appear in rule and no one has a question. Well, they'll still have questions, but that it's very clear in board rule exactly what is to happen. There are a couple of things that we put in, one in particular that I want to highlight. And I'm looking off of the summary document. So I apologize, I don't have the line number, but it's a little bit farther down. There is a piece in section 4, disbursement and expenditure of funds, around carry forward. One of the things we find in a few LEAs each year is there's a significant amount of CT add-on carry forward right here. Thank you. And so we modeled, many times there are reasons for that, but we wanted to really be clear about why they they maintain a carry forward balance from year to year. So we modeled this language and put this in based on some language in special ed board rule. And we did increase the percentage from what special ed uses to a 40% because there are reasons why an LEA might carry forward some CT funds. Often they're building a new school or a new technical center. And so they're saving up to purchase equipment or those sorts of expenditures. And there are reasons for that. But the idea is to really encourage them to spend the money appropriately. And then if they do have a reason for carrying forward an excessive amount of CT add-on funds, that we talk through that with them, we have a spend plan in place, and that we get them to move that money along the way that it's supposed to be used. Really, other than that, from my perspective, this is really just a matter of clarifying in board rule exactly how CT functions when it comes to finances, formulas. All of this money is just flow through money. We just want to be really, really clear about this.
Thank you. And without objection, will you guys remove the firsts and the thirds and stuff like that that are in there? I'm sure Ben can do that, or Jeff. You see what I mean?
Yes, I'll make sure and get that.
Okay. Thank you. And I see a question from Member Davis.
Thank you, Director Longhurst. I think I have PTSD over the 20% carry forward in special ed. So I really, really want to make sure that we monitor this carefully, because we allow a 20% carry forward in special ed. And we have some, I'll give an example. One LEA right now is trying to maintain their carry forward because so they can meet needs of IEPs if there's a downturn, yet still supplemented $4 million out of their account for special ed students last year out of their general funds. But yet the carry forward is seen by legislators as a reason to not fund special ed or increase funding for special ed. So I just want to make sure that we're all really clear that we probably need to watch that carefully and make sure we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, because I think there may be a need at some point to reduce that 20% carry forward in special ed. And now I'm seeing 40%, and I just hope that it never becomes an illusion of freedom that isn't really there. You can keep this 40%, but you're going to lose legislative funding because it's seen there all the time. So that's just one thought, and I'm still going to vote for all this, but I just hope that we'll kind of watch it.
Good point.
I wasn't sure about line 230 also. Are CTE, is CTE required to maintain a maintenance of an MOE, a maintenance of effort by law, or is that just something we're adding into board rule? And then I have one more question after that answered, if that's
okay. Go to line 230, whoever is driving. Angie, maybe.
It looks like an old line, but I just am curious about it.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could answer.
Yes, please.
Yes, so that is a current practice. It's been in state statute for many, many years. And I think our point here was just to clear. Actually, we didn't make a change. The R277-114 in blue is just a hyperlink.
Okay, and following up on Chair Davis's question or comment, concerns about the carry forward. Do you feel, is that a problem, Talia? Do you feel like that we need stronger language in there to make sure that that problem doesn't occur or it continue? Or what's your thought about the adequacy of the protections that require an LEA to spend the money appropriately?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I, Vice Chair Davis, completely agree with you. This is a double-edged sword, right? We want to be really careful about this. We do have some LEAs who incur large carry forward balances, which do not look good at all, but there are purposes in doing that. As I mentioned, opening new schools. I'll give you an example. They'll hate that I named them, but Washington School District is a perfect example. They're getting ready to open a new CTE focused high school. And so they are saving up money to try and make those equipment purchases and do the things that they need to do down there. In my mind, that's a perfectly acceptable reason. However, we do have some LEAs who really don't have a spend plan, who just aren't spending wisely and need to spend those dollars down. I'd be happy to talk about that 40% if it needs to go lower. I'm happy to do that. I agree. I don't want large carry forward balances, but oftentimes there is a reason. And we could take that number down and continue to work with the LEAs who do have high numbers on the reasons for that and on the spend plan. But if you'd like that number to go down, I'm very open to it.
Cindy, do you have a thought about that?
No, I think we should just watch it carefully. And if we need to bring it back, I mean, if it starts bringing unintended consequences, like the 20% allowable in board rule for special ed is bringing unintended consequences, then we may need to revisit it. But I just want to express it at this time. Chair, can I ask a question that might be tangentially related to this rule, and you can deem me out of order if it's not related enough?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was distracted by my binging phone. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Can I ask a tangentially related question? And you can deem me out of order if it needs to be on somewhere else.
No, I appreciate that. Go ahead. Ask the question.
Okay, I think actually, Carol, you and I both have asked this question a couple of times in other conversations, but I just don't know if I ever got, or maybe I didn't ask it right, the information to feel confident. Do you feel, Director Longhurst, that the students who participate in our CTE courses that require big machinery or things that could be dangerous, where a student could lose a finger or an arm, do you feel that they're participating under a teacher who has enough safety training requirements?
That is a great question as well, and one that quite honestly keeps me up at night. Every time I hear a news story about an injury to school, I focus right in. I want to know why, what happened. I think there's no question that there are safety concerns. We work very closely with state risk management. State risk management regularly goes out into the schools to look at the labs, not just CTE labs, but all labs that are in a school, and they work with the schools around safety. The LEAs have the responsibility in board rule and in state statute with state risk management to look at safety, to train on safety. We have a CTE safety committee that is composed of a number of LEAs who come together to work together on how to train their employees, their teaching staff in safety. What are those best practices? We have resources that we can provide, connections that we can help them make. The LEAs will often work together to help, especially with the smaller LEAs, to help train each other's staff and teachers, so that those kinds of things, it is an ongoing concern. But I believe that LEAs are doing their very, very best to make sure that in all areas, not just CTE, safety is a focus.
Chair, follow up?
Yes, please.
So in some of our districts or charters where there's only one teacher who's doing this, are 175 LEAs, do we need some consistency for a safety training for those teachers? I mean, just tell me that a lost arm is not going to be on our heads. I'm stressed about this. So tell us that there are some consistent, that this CTE safety committee best practices, is it required somewhere? Do we need to get required somewhere that they follow certain types of training? I'm concerned about the training.
Yes. So So again, state risk management helps with that. They have certain requirements in place that they check for each year.
For training.
Their training is required by the endorsement. So teachers who are earning endorsements in the areas where safety training is a huge issue, and quite honestly, it's not just, although very much so, with saws and welding equipment and those kinds of things, but also in medical labs, in food labs. There's a lot of safety issues in all of what we do. But as an endorsement requirement, verification of safety training is a requirement in order to receive an endorsement.
And is there to follow up on that, and I'll come back and let you follow up also, Cindy, but is there a timing, like a re-up requirement, a re-upping requirement for those endorsements, or are you just endorsed once and that's one and done?
Yeah, so they are endorsed once and then it's one and done, but there is a safety plan that is required from each LEA, and we monitor that every 3 to 4 years. They must have a safety plan in place and functioning. Risk management works with them on that as well, but we do check for that in our monitoring visits every 3 to 4 years.
Okay, and are you telling us as a committee that those monitoring visits do happen and that they are regularly taking place? They're not just provided for in rule or in.
Yeah, we physically go out, pardon me, we physically go out, except during COVID years. We physically go out on site to each LEA, visit the labs, look for ourselves, check in with the directors to ensure that there is a safety plan in place. That's one of the things, one of the boxes we check off each and every year.
Okay, that's helpful. Cindy, did you have more on that?
So just to sum down to the basic kernel, you are saying to us that we have some consistency in training requirements across LEAs for teachers, and that you feel the training is sufficient to keep students safe.
I do. I always am nervous about that. It hurts my heart to have to blanket statement. Yes, that's not to say that something bad won't happen.
Sure.
But I do believe that safety training, safety monitoring between our office, between state risk management, those kinds of things are out there. I can verify. Sorry, I'm getting massive text, trying to make sure that I report everything that's happening to you. But I can assure you that between our staff monitoring, safety plan monitoring, endorsement requirements, safety training, LEAs working together. And quite honestly, that was one of the biggest things we heard from those smaller LEAs with one teacher. How do I do this on my own? They all have come together and are working together to make sure that instructors are trained appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
That's helpful. I still have that same fear, I guess, because some of those cases, those situations are the most sort of dramatic of all the legal cases that you can read. There are lots of them about shop programs, and not to say that when I was teaching English, there was one student who didn't lose any arms, thumbs, or anything else, but he did manage to handcuff another student to the very old-fashioned radiator in my classroom. So fortunately, we were able to remove it. But I know those things happen in all classes. I just worry about the equipment in an old-fashioned way about shop classes. So thanks for that explanation. Talia, I see Natalie has a question, please.
So I just have some other questions on this, if we're good to move forward.
Yes, I think we are. And I think that I will proceed to have some questions with the idea that we will only make a motion to continue this rule and then give the committee members some time to ask a little more. And then let me just add one thing, because we just, so I don't lose the thought, Natalie, before I go to you. Talia, if you could, for next month when we discuss this one more time, if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if it's going to be too much work, but would you check with a fair sample of LEAs and see what their percent of carry forward is, so that we can have some ability to evaluate whether 40% is appropriate?
I'd be happy to.
Asking too much, is that okay?
We'll do that.
That'd be helpful. Natalie.
Okay, so I'll just go through my list of questions, if that's
Sure.
okay. All right, so I'm looking at lines 59 through 67. And just wondering what the reason is for striking those.
59 through 67.
Yeah, this areas of study.
If I may, Chair Lear.
Please.
So we no longer are organized by areas of study. We're now organized by career cluster and career pathways. So this just brings us into alignment with current practice. In other rules, you've seen that this exact same change happen. And this is just bringing this up to current practice.
Is that, I guess, it seems more ambiguous that we've chosen a more ambiguous language instead of adding clarity. We've just added ambiguity doing that.
Well, those career cluster areas are listed all over. You approve those every year when we bring forward our pathways and programs for the future school years. You see it organized that way. It's been that practice for about 7 or 8 years now.
Okay. I'm looking at line 126 is the definition for summer agricultural program. I'm just wondering if there's a way to simplify that. It seems pretty verbose and I mean, it just.
I can look at that if that's the will of the committee.
Let's go ahead and, if it's okay with you, Natalie, since this is going to come back next month, could we just ask Talia to revisit that definition and see if she can make it a little more lean, succinct? Is that okay?
Okay, that'd be great.
Thanks, Talia. Go ahead.
Line 145, it appears that we're now changing surveys to aptitudes. Are these still actually surveys, and do they need to remain called surveys so that they're covered by laws that govern surveys?
Maybe in answering that, Talia, you can also give us an idea of what kind of questions so that it might allay our concerns or continue our concerns.
You bet. So historically, I think the practice partner, I'm trying to think how best to word this answer. Our partnerships with school counselors, and then in all of our programs, really grades 7 and up. Historically, there's always been some kind of state provided state partnership on this. The state legislature funds what is now known, formerly known as Utah Futures. It's undergone a lot of name changes through the years that I've been associated with it. Used to be Utah Futures and is now Keys to Success. So that is one thing that is a state partnership that is provided to students at no cost. The data is not gathered. It all goes through data privacy approval. It's been out there for a couple of years now as the Keys to Success, yes. Keys to Success program. In addition, the state legislature has also funded an interest aptitude under U-Science. They've received a couple of years of funding now that helps students just identify aptitudes. That data is not gathered by the teacher. The teacher does not have access to it. It's all student and parent data only.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Let's see. 185. I guess I'm concerned about the shift to everything being to partnerships, like these public-private partnerships. And is that just, I don't know exactly what the long-term consequences of that is. It feels like this meshing between our school programs and Department of Workforce Services. And I'm concerned about that aspect.
That, Talia?
You bet. For us, the term partnership just really, it could be formal. Most of the time it's not a formal partnership, and it appears and manifests itself in a number of different ways, from guest speakers coming in, from if you look at some of our capstone programs in a number of our schools where they actually partner with business and they take on projects for businesses to give students real life experiences. It could be something like a field trip. It could be something like an actual internship or apprenticeship, where the idea is to get industry more involved rather than having industry out there just saying, we need more workers, give us kids who can breathe, right? We want them to connect with the schools in their backyards to really have partnerships together, whatever that looks like for them, so that students are getting real world application, what those jobs that they're interested in might be looking like, and so that they make connections for their time after high school.
And yeah, so I think there are definitely there's pros and cons. I just think we have to be careful and make sure we make the parameters clear, so that, we're not, I don't want to see it turn into a sort of Soviet style cradle to career workforce pathway where we're not actually letting the students choose their own course in life. Instead, they're being put on a path towards a certain field.
I have those same concerns as well, and I can assure you that that's one of the things I watch out very carefully for.
And let me just add too, Natalie, that I have seen a number of these in action with these partnerships. There's a fabulous program in Washington District that's newer. There's a really amazing partnership, or that's not even a good enough word for it, in the Park City School District, that I think are just the opposite of what your concerns are. They are making students aware, giving opportunities to students to actually see where some of the careers they never would have considered for themselves could be useful. Things that include animation and technology and opportunities that students didn't have for a lot of years. So I think this is just a really creative and amazing opportunity to give students a better view of what their skills can be, where their skills can be used. So I hear your concerns, but I think that the benefits are so amazing right now.
As long as we watch out and make sure that we're always guarding, I think it does provide a lot of great opportunities for kids.
Great. Okay. You have several more. Randy's been patiently waiting. So
I know. Go ahead, Randy. I'll jump in after you.
Yeah. See how many more you have. Go ahead, Randy.
I just wanted to comment on these partnerships and these opportunities for students. I served for 16 years on the board of directors for MTech, and with Nebo School District, we have really strong connections with MTech, and many of our high school students are receiving excellent training as part of their high school day going to MTech, and the partnerships between industry and businesses in the Valley have provided just incredible opportunities for students to explore and become excited about work possibilities, additional training opportunities, certification opportunities that they perhaps may never have even thought about. And many of them are graduating from high school and immediately finishing certification programs that allow them to jump into employment at $80,000 to $100,000 a year job. The welding area, for example, is, I would say 99% of every student that goes into welding training while they're still in high school already have a job before they've completed all of their certifications. And so it's just a really wonderful opportunity for those students who may not be college bound, but who have great skills and great interest in providing that workforce that makes everything else that we're doing, that with the growth spurts that we're seeing throughout the state, that there's just some really wonderful opportunities, and these industry professional cooperative programs are critical and are such an important part of what we do in CTE education after secondary. So I'm really excited about the continuing opportunities we have for our students. And then whenever Natalie's finished with her questions, I'm excited we have another month that we can consider the details of questions like Natalie's bringing up and everything else that's there in the program, and that we can just, I'm ready to make a motion when the time is right to just continue this as it is for this meeting, and then come back in our next couple of months with all of these clarifying changes that have been described to us. Thank you.
I muted myself. Natalie, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you, Randy.
So line 203. I'm wondering why we're striking quality of programs. I think that would be an important thing to be reviewing. Even if we, changing some lingo, I think it's still important to be reviewing the quality of the programs.
Talia.
Yeah, I agree absolutely with you. I think in our program approval section, and I apologize, I'm depending upon the person on the screen as well. Let me do a quick search on my own document now. There is a whole section on program approval in this rule. It's section 3. And when I talked about, for example, the safety training and reviewing safety plans and looking at safety training, that is all part of our program approval process. Our staff goes out, we visit, for purposes of CTE, our state is divided up into 8 regions, and we connect secondary with post-secondary, with workforce services, all of those components within those 8 areas. We go to 2 regions each year. Again, our staff go out on site, and we actually call those program of quality reviews, POKR visits for the acronym, right? Program of quality reviews. And that's one of the things we go in intensely to look at, is quality of the programs. And so that's just, I'd be happy to put that phrase back in, or that term back in, but that is something we focus very, very significantly on.
So is that just at the beginning when you do that, or is that
it's every year,
constantly going back every year?
Every 4 years, the same LEAs are reviewed every 4 years.
And if we can ask you, Talia, would you look through the rule and see if somewhere else perhaps that phrase is used, or if it should go back in? And
we'll put it back in. I just checked. It's not anywhere else. We'll add a statement about quality in this section 3.
That'd be great. Natalie, next.
Okay, 205. Also, basically 205 through 211. It appears to me that the lines that are being struck out are ones that focus on local control, and those that are like 209, it leaves it so it's based on national instead of local. I just want to keep that local element in there so that we don't lose that and just leave it to the national level.
You bet. So 205 through 207, and then 211 and 212, those are actually just moved to a different part of the rule. And those advisory committees, that local decision-making authority, is just in a different part of the rule now.
Okay.
Is that okay, Natalie? Okay, next.
Yeah, as long as it's still in there. Do you know where in there it is?
I'll look for it, and I'll be able to point that out next month for you.
Okay. 306. I'd like to make a motion to delete 306.
Do you want to speak to that, Talia, and give us a little more background on that? And I would ask you that if you want to make that motion, next month would be the time to do that.
Okay.
But Talia, do you want to speak to help us understand what it is?
You bet. So Educators Rising is a nationally affiliated Career and Technical Student Organization, CTSO, Career and Technical Student Organization. It's the organization that is for students who are interested in going on and becoming future educators or working in school environments. We're in our 3rd year of being affiliated with Educators Rising. We have a very strong and very much growing pathway in teaching as a profession. And this is just the Associated Student Organization. It's been very successful in Utah to date.
And we've got another 15th there. And Angie, if you'll make a note to Jeff to remove his fixation with the THs and the RDs. But Natalie, did you have different information about Educators Rising that you want to communicate?
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time on their website last night, educatorsrising.org, and it is full of social justice activism, culturally responsive trainings for teachers on how to incorporate this into this field. And we just have to stay away from anything that's pushing that. And if, you don't have to dig very deep on their website. I encourage everybody to go and check it out.
All right, thank you. I think we'll do that before next month. And on the the other hand, without the same familiarity you currently have, I love the idea that we would be informing students about possible educator roles using these skills. So I don't want to take that away or detract from that. If there's other information, then that might be concerning, but I think we can all look at that. And go ahead.
Sorry, the other part on their website is very much about increasing educator diversity. To the extreme, they even have a visual, a graphic visual on their website that shows, like 20 Black icon figureheads versus, with only 3 in there. Like, this is what they consider, diversity, teacher diversity, where it's not, just elevating or increasing the number of, ethnic or racial diversity in our educators, but more of a taking over of the educator role. So, and leaving it so that, white teachers are very much the minority. It was like 20-3, an extreme example. And I don't know that, I'm pretty sure they don't pick those graphics unintentionally. So
and that if that's the kind of motion you'd like to make, I would just ask us to wait till next month and we.
Okay, that's fine. I do have questions on, there's this whole section. First one is on like 310 to 314, and then 298 to 306, and several other sections on student leadership organizations and funding those instead of using the funds for student competition costs. I have concerns about funding all of these organizations instead of our students.
And Matt, I see your hand, but let's finish this idea and then we'll come to you. Do you have a response to that, those changes about student leadership organizations, Talia?
You bet. So up until about 3 or so years ago, in order to run the student organizations, that each LEA paid into a fund to provide some oversight to allow us to contract with some employees or some staff to oversee the student organizations. At that time, about 3 years ago or so, the legislature gave us directly some funding so that LEAs didn't have to pay for that. And so now that funding just comes outside of that. You've already approved R277914, which is the rule specific to career and technical student organizations. The changes here just bring up to date the practices and the way that we fund those organizations. So particularly lines go back down, lines 315, that's just the formula by which they receive add-on funding for membership in CTSOs. And then again, that LEA flexibility that you talked about, that money goes back to the LEAs. They determine how they want to spend those dollars.
Thanks.
So my question is,
Go ahead.
sorry, Chair. My question is, why do we need these organizations? Why? To me, it is ceding control, that local control again to outside organizations instead of keeping it locally driven and giving more funding to the students instead of organizations.
So, yeah, so the language that you're looking at here in this board rule are for the LEAs. This is money that goes to the LEAs for them to determine how to spend it.
And for their own leadership internally, is my understanding.
Correct.
Natalie, do you have others?
So student leadership organizations are local organizations?
They are national organizations that Utah affiliates with a number of them, yes. But
And
LEAs
what?
choose whether or not to participate.
And how much influence do those organizations have in what's being taught at the local level?
So it's mainly around student leadership and student competitions so that students can demonstrate the knowledge and skills that they've been learning in their CTE programs and classes. And they do that through a competitive sort of format. There isn't curriculum that goes along with it. It's not a curricular sort of endeavor.
So paying for the organizations is paying for their competitions.
And leadership
opportunities. And leadership. They have leadership activities, they have leadership experiences, and then they also attend some competitions, is my understanding.
Okay. I have only just one last question.
Okay.
Lines 339 to 340. What counts as approved when it says approved programs? And what are some of the names of those programs that have been approved?
So again, you as a board approve those programs each year, usually in the early fall. You decide, we recommend those to you and you approve them. And that goes back to career clusters and career pathways.
Can you give her an example of one or two, or give us an example of one or two?
You bet. So let's pick on, hold on, let me actually not make one up. Let me give it to you completely. Hold on one second.
Do you have a list you could just send us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's on the website. Usually in September, you approve these each year. And I would be happy to send that out to the committee, the list of pathways and clusters that we already have approved. The pathways and clusters for next school year. We'll come back to you in the fall with our list, and it doesn't change much from year to year, but the pathways and clusters for 23-24 school year, you'll see that. So for example, I'll pick on the one that that my personal background is in, and that's health science. The career cluster name is health science, and the pathway is health science, and that helps students prepare for careers in the medical field. Whether that be nurses or radiology technicians or dental assistants, et cetera, et cetera. There is law, public safety, corrections, and security, which is a protective services pathway for students who want to go into criminal justice or law enforcement. Many in the computer science and information technology cluster, from cybersecurity, information technology systems, web development, programming, and software development. Those are a few examples.
Really good examples. That's great. And I'm sure that all of us would appreciate that list.
Okay, thank you.
That's your last question. We will come back to this next month. So we'll have another chance to make sure our questions are answered. And I appreciate, Talia, your expert responses. With that, I think we're ready, Randy, for your motion.
Thank you, Chair Lear. I recommend that the committee continues R277-911 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
The motion is the committee continues R277-911 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Committee members, please vote. I see 5 votes in the affirmative. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Talia, for your expertise and your presence. And I'm hoping that we did get a lot of questions answered this month, so we may not have so many next month. But I felt like another month to process a lot of changes would be helpful. So I hope everybody's good with that. Moving on to the next item. Item action 1.7, R277-622, school-based mental health qualified grant. And this is an amendment. And still no Jeff, is that right, Angie?
That's right. He is probably going to be joining us very shortly, but I can start the introduction if you'd like.
Yes.
Great. So R277-622 is being amended in response to a bill or a portion of SB2. And this was also in response to one of our policy requests that the board and staff requested. You may remember that we have the school-based mental health qualified grant program, which is a program that provides funds to LEAs to contract with or actually hire qualified personnel. The term that they use in the statute is qualifying personnel. So you'll see throughout the rule that the references to qualified personnel were changed to qualifying personnel.
Yeah.
But also the SB2 now allows staff to use 1.5 million approximately of carry forward funds from this program to do a grow your own type program for those qualified personnel or the personnel that are listed in the grant program. And I did notice that Jeff jumped in. I'll just finish kind of this overarching introduction and then maybe pass it over to him. And as you saw in the background, what staff is planning to do, and it's at the very bottom of the bill. I'll just go to the general discuss at the bottom of the bill. It codifies the SB2 allowed the state board and staff to codify a grow your own type program. And I believe it's about 389. Ben is where I saw it in the bill. And the bottom of the rule creates that program, which will essentially give approximately or up to $14,000 per year over 2 years for those qualified personnel. So now that Jeff is here, I don't know if you want to add anything, but in general, all of the amendments are in response to this change that allows us to establish this new program and make some technical amendments. And then Tiana McCall is also here in the Zoom room. She is the specialist. She's our school social worker contact and has been very invested and involved in this amendment at the legislative level and now with this rule as well.
Great. Jeff, do you have anything to add? I don't know how much of that you heard in terms of that introduction, and or Tiana.
Sure. Can you hear me? I've been having kind of an unstable internet today.
You're great.
So if you don't see me, I apologize. I didn't catch if Angie mentioned that most of the edits before section 9 were already approved by the board in the January board meeting. As you may recall,
that,
okay,
Jeff, so that was a
perfect.
good reminder.
So most of the edits you see before that new addition at the end of the rule, you already voted on and approved. However, due to some turnover in staff, the filing for that rule was not completed. And so we are now just merging the new edits on top of those so that you can see that. And I will also add everything you see in red for draft 2, as we're striking out some things. The matching requirement is no longer necessary. And so we're taking out all the references to the matching requirement.
So to make sure I understand, Jeff, and you can scroll down maybe Ben for this, so that really the board has already looked at this recently, this rule recently, and the only thing new is section 9 and beyond that.
Section 8, I misspoke.
Section 8, okay, so 8 is new. Okay, all right, so with that explanation, thank you very much, both of you, for tag teaming. Are there any board member questions? I see that Natalie has a question.
Yes, so I actually was looking at line 52. Can we look at that?
having this been recently approved by the board, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, go
so I would actually like to make a motion to amend that line so that it says access to mental health service. Access to mental health service for at-risk students.
Jeff or Angie, do you have any, instead of students who are underserved or at risk? At risk is already there. Underserved, you would delete. Is that what you're saying, Natalie?
Yeah, I think it should be for all students that are at risk. I don't think that we need to leave that word in there because it's already inclusive of that by just saying a plan for how qualifying personnel will increase access to mental health service for at-risk students.
And Angie or Jeff, would you like to speak to why maybe that, if that's a good term or if there's some reason for that?
Sure. And Tiana can give me backup on any of this as well, but you'll note on line 52 the word including for students. So when the word including is there, everything that follows is an example list, but not an exhaustive list. So the amendment would be fine if we kept the word including, because including essentially is saying it's going to be for all students, but we did give a special call out to those who are underserved or at risk.
Okay.
And to board member Klein's point, I do think sometimes underserved and at risk get used interchangeably. So I may need to toss it to Tiana to see if that's what we're doing here. And if so, I think even more so the amendment would be considered innocuous.
Tiana?
Yes, thank you. I'm Tiana McCall, the school social work / school-based mental health specialist. I was trying to see if that language was included in the statute to see if that was why we referenced those specific words, but I'm not seeing it in our related statute. So I agree with Jeff. They're used pretty much interchangeably. So,
okay.
Isn't at risk defined in code somewhere?
It is. It's not defined specifically in this program's code, but it is defined in statute in other places.
Is it one of our definitions in our definitional rule?
Let me double check that really fast.
Ben could maybe while you're, we're going to list, while you're checking that, we're going to go to Matt.
Well, and maybe you can check for me. That's what I'm curious before I vote on some sort of a amendment here. I'm curious as to what underserved is referencing here. Is it simply the list of ethnicities that have been listed before, right? Is it because of a certain skin color or where you're from? Is that automatically qualify for you for underserved, or is there a different definition? Because I tend to agree with Natalie here. We want to target, or we want to help all students who are at risk, not who actually need it. And so if it's being used synonymously, then I'd be in favor of taking it out.
So do we have an answer yet about whether at risk is in our definitional rule?
Neither term is used in the definitional rule, and I'm just running a quick check on the rules generally for either term. And not finding that either term is defined in our rule. So now I'm just checking statute to make sure, but I do think we are using those interchangeably. So I don't see an issue with board member Klein's amendment.
Okay.
I do have a clarifying question for Jeff. You mentioned when you were explaining that it's the including is there because you want to increase access for all students, including, but it doesn't say all, it just says including. But like Matt said, these mental health services access should be increased for those that are at risk. Too many times our kids are starting to be made to feel like if there's nothing wrong with them, there's something wrong with them. And I don't want this push towards mental health services or access to it to make kids feel like in order to be normal, they have to have something wrong with them, which is where we're going. Kids are more and more feeling like if something's not wrong with them, something's wrong with them. And so this should specifically be for kids at risk. And I think that at risk is defined in our code. And so I would stick with my original motion that we increase access to mental health for kids, for students at risk.
And to answer that question, Chair, if I may.
Please.
At risk is defined in the code. It's in 53F2-314. That's the place where, as you may recall, the weighted pupil unit for at-risk students was, I believe, a 2021 legislative session change.
Okay.
And they did include the definition of at-risk for students who score below proficient on a state board or LEA approved assessment, or whatever else an LEA governing board chooses to define at risk to mean.
Okay. So
underserved is being used superfluously here. We do not need the word underserved.
I hear you, and I think there's consensus on that, but it'd still be a motion. Let's hear a couple of the comments to this proposed amendment.
Can I just verify that I have the motion correct on the screen share?
Plan for how qualified personnel will increase access to mental health services for at-risk students.
Is that what your motion is?
Yeah,
No.
and if you want to refer to that code, you can.
As
so that they know that's a defined term.
As defined in 53F-3-214, or.
Yep.
That's great. If would you like that, Natalie? Would you like to add that citation?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Now, Cindy, do you have a question or comment to the motion?
I have a substitute motion.
That'd be great. In order. Go ahead.
A plan for how qualifying personnel will increase access to mental health service for students in need and or including at-risk students. Because I don't want to limit, there could be a student that's not an at-risk student that has, parent goes into the hospital the night before and they need some support that day. I don't want to limit this to students who are achieving a certain score on a test or whatever, however, people are defining that. I think I agree with Board Member Klein in saying that we shouldn't say every student needs mental health service. That is not the goal of that amendment either. But I don't want to limit if a child comes who has need for some support that they can't get it because we've made it too narrow here.
They don't meet the definition of at-risk. I hear you. That is the now proposed. Hold on, I lost the phrase. Substitute amendment.
Would you? Do we need the word for?
Including.
It feels like there should be quotation marks around at risk if we leave for in there.
It's fine. That's a friendly amendment. It can just say,
and we can't
you need including at-risk students.
Including
that's fine. I just don't want to limit if a child comes who's really suffering, who's not an at-risk student in general, who might need some help that we're going to limit some access.
Taking the board.
I am in schools all the time, and there are incidentals all the time where a little one just needs some extra support that day because of something crazy that happened. Their brother got hit by a car or whatever.
Right. No, taking the board's prerogative discretion, I would say I agree with that. Randy, did you have additional comment to the substitute amendment?
Yeah, the fact that we are defining at risk by what was defined in section 53F-2-314 really does, in my mind, at risk before he read that was any student that was at risk because their little brother was just run over by a car or whatever, but we're very specific in that definition that it's students that are lacking in certain skills or performed in a certain way in this assessment. And so I think it's, I'm favorable to look at Cindy's substitute motion so that it's more inclusive for kids that just need it and weren't at risk according to that definition that is already in the rule.
Okay. And so is it a friendly amendment, Cindy, to still add the reference to the definition of at-risk students?
That's fine. I mean, that's in the law, right? So
yes,
either way, it's going to be the reality. So.
All right. So that we'll just leave it as is. We'll just leave it as is then, Jeff. She didn't jump all over that. So we have a substitute motion. We have a substitute motion that now creates an amendment on lines 51 through 52 that would read, a plan for how qualifying personnel will increase access to mental health students in need, including at-risk students, period. Any final discussion to that substitute amendment? Natalie, is your hand up to speak to the substitute amendment?
So are you adding the reference to the law or no?
In Cindy didn't prefer that, but maybe she'll accept that from you.
If it adds clarity, it already is the law. It's already going to be, and if it adds clarity, that's fine. What I'm trying to find is just striking a balance to where we're not offering mental health service to every single child and saying, you have to have mental health service. Yeah. So we're limiting it to those in need, but we're not limiting it so much that there can't be incidental need. You may have a student that really is not deemed at risk in general, that does have a temporary or incidental type of a need, and those children turned away because of that.
I understand her intent. I would still ask that we include that reference because it doesn't change her intent, but it does add some clarity in case people do not realize that is a defined term in code,
okay with you,
so that they can't misinterpret it for their own purposes.
That's fine. Need, including, great. So then the substitute motion now reads, the first part will increase access to mental health services, it should be plural, I think, for students in need, including at-risk students as defined in section 53F-2-314. That is the motion. Randy, did you have a statement to that motion?
I was just wondering, Cindy, did you suggest that at-risk could be in quotations? No.
No,
I don't care if it's in quotations. I mean, I think it's fine the way it is, because from what I'm understanding from the code, it's defining students who are showing signs of really not achieving and succeeding, but also could be defined as the LEA determines other qualifiers. So it leaves a bit of local control there, which I'm fine with. So I think it's fine as it's written, unless staff or other board members see something that I've missed or gone on a path that could have unintended consequences.
And rule writing doesn't really allow us to put quotes, even quotation marks, even if we would like to. So that would be the motion that you see on the screen. That's the substitute motion. Would committee members please vote? And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes in the affirmative, so the rule is amended. Any more questions? Primarily, I'd like us to focus on what was just, we don't have to, but everything else was reviewed and passed by the board a month ago or 2 months ago. So I'd like us to focus on the last section that brings us into compliance with the new law. Any other?
Yeah.
Natalie?
Just a real quick question. I'm just thinking about it now. I should have looked for it earlier had I thought of it. Is there anywhere in here that requires that there be parental consent before student receives mental health services.
Jeff, do you want to speak to that?
I would need to go back to the code. So Tiana, if you know off the top of your head, but otherwise I'll pull up the code really quick and double check. My gut instinct is yes. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's actually there.
Well,
Because yeah.
The other, this rule doesn't stand in isolation. All the requirements of the law still come to bear on this rule. So
is it in law? I guess
it
that's
is
what
in
Jeff's
law that
checking.
they can't provide service, that schools can't provide mental health services to students without parental permission.
And I'll double check the code right now unless Tiana knows off the top of her head.
You can go to that section about, I think it's about medications, but.
Chair, may I?
Sure, please.
This is Tiana McCall, the school social work specialist. It is outlined in the statute that LEAs must be in compliance with the parental consent laws.
Are you okay with that then, Natalie?
Is that include mental health services for their child?
Yes, it's specifically included in the statute connected with this rule that the LEAs must be in compliance with providing consent for these services that are outlined in the.
Okay, for these services specifically, yes. and that code is referenced here in the rule.
I believe
it's probably under the authority and purpose, maybe.
It is, and it's referenced throughout. So it's 53F-2-415.
So in the statute, item number 7 in 53F, okay. Item 7.
Item or lines, not lines.
Line 7, sorry.
Right there. Oops. You're just making me dizzy here.
Okay. And it is a little bit of a confusing, it's like a reference to a reference. So the code says that if an LEA receives the money, they must provide the mental-based health support service as it complies with 53E-9-203, which is the parental consent code.
Right. So we see there that it is.
Where are you looking?
It's in subsection 7C of the programs code of 53F-415.
We've got a little, well, my
415.
Maybe you can highlight it. Maybe someone who's driving highlight that for, there you go. Natalie.
53E is the parental consent code.
The very last there.
Okay.
Cindy, did you have a comment to this item or issue?
Oh, I thought she said that was her last question, so I'm ready to move it since we only have 20.
Okay, I think so. Natalie, you are.
That's good.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Cindy, please.
I move that the committee approves R277-622 draft 2 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Can I ask staff if I said that right? I didn't know if I needed to add the as amended in there.
You said it right.
Okay. Thank you. Then I'll repeat that. The motion is the committee approves R277-622 as amended, draft 2 as amended on first reading forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Would committee members please vote? And there we are. I think we have, yes, we have 5 unanimous votes, 5 votes, and it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Let's move on quickly to the next item. Thanks again for your help. Tiana, thanks for joining us. The last item is an action item on 1.8, library materials model policy. Do you want to speak to that, Jeff and/or Naomi?
I can do a quick tee up and then pass it over probably to Ashley, unless Sarah or Naomi want to jump in first. But as you recall, R277-628 passed the full board in the January meeting, and that was the rule that required that an LEA by September 1st of this year have a policy in place for the selection and reconsideration of materials within the library. The rule also required that there be a model policy created by the state board. And as part of the motion, Board Member Klein asked that the model policy be brought back for full board approval. So that is where we're at now. You're having the model policy that has been drafted by Ashley, Naomi, and Sarah, who did incredible work. So hats off to them. I cannot take any credit. So I just get to be the introduction guy today, but I have really nothing, not all of the hard work was any of my own. They did a really good job and have brought it for you to begin the process to have it approved by committee and then full board, hopefully with next month. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Chair, and I'll just have Sarah, Naomi, and Ashley kind of rock, paper, scissors on how they want to walk through the elements of the policy.
And Ashley, yeah, I shouldn't pick you. I shouldn't pick on you, but which one of the three of you would like to describe the elements or the parts of the policy?
If Sarah or Naomi would like to do it, I would like to give them that opportunity. They did a lot of the background work on pulling example policies from Murray and Jordan and other school districts. And so I more worked on the legal aspects and the appendices. So I'd love to give them that opportunity.
Anybody asking for that opportunity? I don't see, maybe I'm not seeing everybody.
What was it? Could you repeat that?
Oh, she was just saying there are two other people who worked with her. I was looking for if Natalie, not Natalie, if that would be you. If Naomi or who was the other person?
It would be Sarah.
Or Sarah.
Okay.
Would somebody like to just take us through the important changes of this?
Sure.
I don't see. Oh, go ahead. Sarah, go
Sure.
ahead.
Sarah Whipkey, pre-K through 12 literacy and library media coordinator. Thank you for having me. As far as that first change, I believe that was requested from some board members on that very first line that you're seeing.
So sorry for interrupting. What we're looking at then is draft 2. We're working from a draft 2, which came from member Davis and Hymas, if I'm correct, right?
Chair there.
Yeah.
There. Can I ask if Sarah's gonna speak to us? Can you speak to the policy before changes? What your thought was with, for example, I've recommended that we strike the entire purpose and mission, right? And so I'd like to hear, before we vote on anything, what your reasoning behind the original draft is.
So speak to the original draft, Sarah, if that's okay, and then we'll make changes as necessary or as desired. Go ahead.
Sure. Do we want to have the original policy on the screen, or are you okay with this one being on the screen?
It shows the strikeouts. I think it's fine. Just go to the top. There you go.
Great, thank you. To whoever is running the screen, I appreciate your support. So as far as the sort of background on what we did, we, like Ashley was sharing, we looked at several LEA policies. We also submitted our original policy to our LEAs and librarians for them to also provide feedback, and then made changes based on their feedback, since they are obviously in the field and we are not. So we want to make sure we have their voice, represented as well. And so the purpose and vision was really, or purpose and mission, sorry, was really more around letting them know sort of what the purpose of the library is, and the rationale as to why they felt that was so important to have in the model policy is because sometimes they feel like some people assume that a librarian is just someone who checks books in and out, but they actually have a much bigger role in this space, and they just really felt that it would be important for them to really see that there really is a purpose and mission to their role and to the role of the school library as sort of being the heart of a school. And so they felt like that was a really important piece to have included. And if we scroll down to thank you. I think we scrolled over section 2 just a moment ago, which was around if we could scroll up just a little bit more. Yes, yeah, for the support of intellectual freedom, they wanted to make sure that that was included based on the First Amendment of the Constitution and some specific court cases around school library. And then if we go to the next section, it was around sort of maintenance and selection. And so
they have sort of the responsibility of the selection, sort of what that purpose is, and then the selection criteria, which if we scroll down, you'll notice there are specific criterion that are included, which also reflects gifts and donations if those were to be added as well. And if we keep scrolling down.
Let me pause you for 1 second, Sarah, and
Yeah.
say, and ask Ashley, if you'll put the full citation of that Island Tree Schools case in there, the full name. Just
Yes,
for-
absolutely.
that's without objection, I'm sure. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. And then you can see the criteria of sort of what they're looking at as far as deciding what would be in the collection. And so that's what that A through J is for. And then if we keep scrolling down, oh, A through K, oh, L, sorry. If we keep scrolling down, then we have the collection, maintenance, and weeding part of the policy, and then reconsideration, which, as you can see, there's been some changes in that space. And then if we keep going down, you'll see a little bit more about what those specific, the purpose of those pieces are. And so you have challenges, the committee members, voting, and sort of all of those details around what the committee would do to ensure that if there is someone who is concerned about a book that there are, or a library material, that something is, done. And then moving down to the very bottom, it's that the policy would be revised from time to time. They also felt like it was really important to have a specific, if we scroll a little bit down, a specific example of a form that they could use, so they wouldn't necessarily have to recreate one if they don't have one. And so this was a very generic example of a reconsideration form, and obviously they would be able to make changes as they see fit. And then at the very end, we have a list of sort of court cases and laws that are in request to board member Klein's responses from the last couple meetings, to make sure that we include sort of the referenced court cases and laws that pertain to this space. And so we added that section specifically to address her concerns.
Thank you. Matt, would it suit you, because you and Cindy primarily provided this, the proposed changes? Can we just go section by section and pass section by section? Does that suit you okay?
I'm okay with that if Cindy is, because we'll kind of bounce back and forth.
Because I do have a couple of proposed amendments. They're pretty simple, but
As do I.
so let's start with section 1, and the proposed section reads as we see it. I think we can just start with that and start with the underlined language as that's what's now proposed, unless you want to insert something else.
Yeah, let me just jump in on this first section, if that's okay, Chair Lear.
Please do.
Yeah, so in reading this, I just looking over this, thinking about the responsibility, or not the responsibility, because the purpose of a school library. First off, I do feel like this purpose and mission drives the document. And so I wanted to keep it as general as possible, understanding that this is going out to LEAs, where we don't know which direction they're going to want to take this. And so I'm trying to keep it as general, like I said, general as possible without leading. I don't agree that school libraries have the responsibility of introducing students to the world of information. I think that teachers can do that students can go to libraries and just pick up a book. But a school library, if I think of what a school library does, it is there to support and enhance student learning. That is, in my opinion, very general. It like it says here, that it should include relevant age appropriateness and varied sources. So just a simple revised, if you will, purpose. So that's my recommendation for section.
I have a substitute amendment there, or a substitute link, one substitute addition on that. And I don't know why if it's my screen that keeps bouncing back to cover the word, or if it's something else, but my proposed.
I'm sorry, Chair, that's my fault. I need to be able to display the Word doc, so I'm switching to share.
Helpful. Don't worry about that. I support the underlined language with the addition of the word balanced in that list of words, which is taken from above. They should include balanced, and I don't care where it goes, balanced, relevant, age appropriate, and varied sources. So I propose that line.
And that's a friendly amendment for me, Carol.
Okay, so other ideas or comments on that particular section? I'm not seeing any hands. So let's vote on that section. Would somebody like to move that, or can I just go ahead?
Have I captured what Matt wanted, or what Member Hymas wanted to change there? I'm sorry.
Yes, I need a comma after balanced.
Yes, you have, Ben. Thank you. And I'm willing to make a motion.
Go ahead,
I don't know if
Matt.
I can do it correctly, but I move that the committee add the underlined writing and remove the stricken language from the model policy.
The motion is that the committee approves the underlined language as written to put that into the record. School libraries exist to support and enhance student learning. They should include balanced, relevant, age appropriate, and varied sources.
From section 1, I think Natalie mentioned that.
Right. So that would be the proposed or amended language for section 1. All in favor? All committee members in favor? I see 5 votes in the affirmative. Moving on to section 2, Matt.
This one, as far as I can tell, doesn't have any changes, and I'm actually going to, if Member Davis is here, I'm actually going to let her, not let her, I can't let her do anything. She can do whatever she wants, but.
Oh, no. Oh, no, not so fast. Go ahead.
The chair is in control of this meeting, apparently.
Oh, totally. I have very little power, but I have this power. Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, on the number 3, that should say communication, not combination.
I just fixed that.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to add a communication piece under the responsibilities. So it would be added in the section heading, and then it would just say responsibility of communication. The LEA will communicate material selection and reconsideration policy clearly to patrons. Policy that they can put it on their website. They can do something of like that, but it needs to be accessible to all the patrons.
Okay. I had one non-sub change that I just mentioned to Ashley in section 2 that I will just assume will be made, and that's that she'll add the full title of the Island Tree versus Pecos case. So I'm not going to go back and worry about that, but now on section 3, the new language would be what was proposed earlier, but we would add responsibility of communication. And I can't see if there's a colon. Yes, the LEA will communicate, or an LEA will communicate material selection and reconsideration policies. An LEA will communicate material selection and reconsideration policy. Is it okay to repeat, Cindy, just for reading simplicity? The LEA will communicate its material selection and reconsideration policy clearly to patrons.
That's a friendly amendment, and so moved.
It's no apostrophe. It's policy. There we go, right there. So the motion on section 3 is to add communication to the title, and then
No. I'm sorry. Point of order.
Oh, go ahead.
It's to go before material selection. The LEA will communicate its material selection and reconsideration.
Sorry, my fault. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair Lear, point of clarification again.
Yes,
Are we voting on all of 3 at once? If we have any other concerns on 3 or amendments on 3 or questions on 3, are we doing this by section, or are we going to take care of Member Davis's amendment and then stay within the 3rd section?
great question, and I think that's a good point. Let's vote on this, and because this has a couple of other meaty paragraphs, we'll go to those paragraphs after the vote on this. So are there any?
I have a friendly amendment on this before we vote, if that's okay.
Yes, that'd be great, Randy.
So in the title, we've listed communication third, but then put it first in the body of the thing. Is it possible to reorder it so that it's if the heading is selection, maintenance, and communication, that communication is the third one down, or put communication first and keep the body of the work as it is there?
My original intent would be that verbiage would be third, because you would explain what the policy is, and then you would say this needs to be communicated to the patrons. So
thank you.
That to third.
We're asking you to do a lot on the fly, so thank you for that. Thank you, Randy. So let's deal with this amendment first, this proposed underlined statement. Any other questions or concerns related to that?
No, sorry. I'm so sorry that the responsibility of communication is not in that list. It's in the section above where it's listed in the section header. It's procedures for selection, maintenance, and communication.
I thought that member Booth just asked that be moved to last. So that's what I was trying to do.
Within its section. Randy, it says responsibility of selection criteria, responsibility of communication.
Oh, I moved it to the wrong section. I'm sorry. It's my document that's confusing me.
Yeah, it's okay.
Nobody could do that very easily. So if you'll move it back to in the section that we're discussing, 3.
Under selection of criteria.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it will be third.
It's in section 3.
So you're in section 3 now. It's just at the end of.
At the end of section 3. So it goes after criteria.
Where it says section 3 has responsibility of selection, then it has selection criteria, then it will have responsibility of communication.
That's what we've got.
The beginning of section 3. There. You're saying because the criteria goes with the paragraph.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I understood.
Thank you.
And you're okay.
I've been wrong this whole entire time, and I will own it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, just to that one element, that one sentence, any questions or comments to that one sentence? I see Natalie.
I just have amendments to section 2 and 3.
All right, hold that thought. Matt, do you have a?
It's a later on thing.
Okay, we just skipped over 2, Natalie, but we'll come back to it.
Thank you.
And I need to also check with my peeps and see if we can go till 12:15. And the whole UBA is processing that.
Yes, I think there's not a problem with that.
All right. So to this one sentence, I see no further hands. The language reads, added to section 3, responsibility of communication. The LEA will communicate its material selection and reconsideration policy clearly to patrons. All in favor of that?
Can I clarify, are you just voting on section 3 and not the ones in section 1 and 2 you spoke about?
No, just that sentence. We've passed number 1. We voted on any changes, proposed changes to number 1, I thought. But
Did we vote? I don't think we voted on any of these that have been said so far.
I think we voted on the amendment that Matt proposed to number 1.
On section 1 is the one we have voted for.
With the purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is now only to this sentence in section 3. All in favor? Or no, all vote in favor or otherwise. I see 5 votes in favor of that. So now we can go, let's finish up section 3 and then if we need to, we can go back to your concerns about section 2. Okay, Matt, because you're kind of leading this, or whoever, Matt or Cindy, whoever wanted to continue to address section 3, if you had questions or if you didn't.
I do have a quick question for staff.
You're
Go ahead,
frozen.
Matt.
I think we lost him.
Matt, are
I'm
you
gonna text
frozen?
him. I'll text him.
I think he's frozen.
Okay. I can't read his mind, so I'm gonna have to, oh, he's probably coming back in.
How's that?
There, great, yes.
I'm sorry, guys. I turned off my camera. We'll see if that helps.
Okay, go ahead.
Can staff just help me understand what timeliness and or permanence is in that criteria?
Ashley, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So I was not the one that drafted those, so I don't know if Sarah has a better or Naomi has a better understanding. The way I read it is timeliness like to modern issues, and then permanence as far as the way I would read it would be, you know, books that are considered classics, for example, like the permanence of keeping those in because they're classics. But I don't want to speak over Sarah or Naomi there if they have a better grasp.
Do you have other thoughts about that, Sarah, Naomi, in as few words as possible?
I agree with Ashley's explanation.
Thank you. Sarah, anything else to add?
No.
Okay. Okay. I'm hoping he heard that. Matt just said his computer froze and he's trying to get back in. So,
I just got back on.
okay. Go ahead,
I
Matt.
missed it all, but I can get it in an email. I know we're on a time crunch. Is it, from what you heard, is it relevant? That's what I'm asking.
From what I heard, permanence was more referring to classics, the importance of enduring works in our school libraries. Timeliness is in light of current issues. And I think that I'm going to pull out of the hat my own example. Some people might object to some of the language and words in Huck Finn, but in terms of our understanding today, those would be acceptable words and phrases. Am I getting at what you think that means, Sarah, Naomi?
I think that works.
Okay. Matt,
Yeah, that
you?
helps. I didn't want to, when I see timeliness and permanence and or permanent, I didn't want to rush books in. You know what I mean? I didn't want to rush things. I didn't want to say, no, this is here for good regardless. You know what I mean? So thank you.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking of it that way. I was more thinking of it in terms of appropriateness in today's world and with our understanding of today's words, phrases, etc.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
And I see that you've added, I don't know if you added this, Matt, or who added legality. It's also added at the end.
That would be Cindy, but I am happy to support that.
Okay. And Natalie, do you have other questions about the other parts of section 3?
No, I just need to make an amendment or motion, I guess.
On
Want me to do that now?
Yeah.
Section 3?
If it's in section 3, yes.
Okay, so it's motion number 2 that I sent to staff. And I would add that just after the responsibility of selection. And it's 3 examples or 3 little paragraphs there, and I'm happy to read those.
Are you proposing this in section 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Just under the responsibility of selection.
So this would be
just adding to what's already there.
Okay.
Not changing or removing.
Can you give us
anything.
a minute to read it?
Yep.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it out loud?
Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Yes, go ahead and read it for the record.
Okay. When selecting books and other media for a school or classroom, the library professional and the teacher respectively shall choose materials that do not distract or overwhelm students with content above their maturity level that could harm their mental and emotional well-being. Attempts to manage content in an effort to protect students is not an attack on certain groups and should never be construed as such. The school and district support reasonable reading material that protects students' mental and emotional health and honors the trust the parents have given the library professional and teacher. If school library material is deemed too explicit to be read aloud by an adult during a public meeting in the presence of children or read aloud by a minor in front of an audience of their peers, then it automatically qualifies as going against the prevailing community standards and shall be automatically removed from the school and from its digital library.
Thank you for reading.
Oh, and then there is one more. Yeah. If a student or a teacher would be disciplined for using the same explicit or offensive language found in a select piece of school library material or media, or if they could be charged outside of the school with a crime against children for showing or distributing the images or descriptions found within the library material, then the library material shall be automatically removed from the school and its digital library.
Okay, I was notified that Ashley Beal has, our AAG Beal has a comment about these paragraphs. Ashley?
I do, yes. So my concern with paragraph 2 has to do with, let's see, paragraph 1, I guess, with the language of the trust and honors the parents have given the library professionals. So just a comment here is that FERPA doesn't give parents the right to inspect library records. Library records are specifically excluded from FERPA as educational records go. And so parents don't necessarily have the right to obtain their children's library records. And the Library Bill of Rights from the National ALA organization recognizes the privacy and confidentiality rights that youth have in their library use. And that's under their First Amendment right to free inquiry and privacy.
I would argue that.
Let her finish and then you can respond. Go ahead, Ashley.
Okay. Sure. So that they have that First Amendment right as they mature, that they're provided with the opportunities to develop their own intellect and check out books that are appropriate. And so that I'll start with that language, and then I have others on other responses on paragraph 2, but we can go one by one here.
Okay, Natalie, to paragraph 1, do you want to respond briefly, please?
To the comments on the American Library Association and their Bill of Rights, that has no bearing here. That's not law. That's their own document for their own purposes. We are going by law, and FERPA. That's a twisting of the FERPA law. FERPA is to protect the privacy of students' data from third-party vendors, not from parents. It also, I would argue, is against PPRA that gives parents the right to inspect upon request any instructional material that is used by an LEA for a student. And so parents have the right to instruct, parents have the right to know what their children are checking out. Parents have, I mean, even the Library Association said that, saying that they have the right to restrict what their children have access to, just not other people's children. That part is, again, but that is the opinion of the American Library Association. That has no bearing. The parents have the ultimate right, and that speaks to another amendment of mine.
Okay, let's go to paragraph 1. The chair's going to take the prerogative to say, I'm concerned about that. Natalie, I would not vote for this because there are too many legally uncertain words that could not harm their mental and emotional well-being as determined by who, that could not be construed as such as determined by who, protect students' mental and emotional health as determined by who, and honors the parents' trust as determined by who. So I can't, in the effort that I did support for Matt and Cindy to make this more lean, I don't support this paragraph. Others want to speak to paragraph 1 on under Natalie Klein motion 2. Would you prefer, Natalie, that we vote on this all at once or that we vote on it paragraph by paragraph?
Either way.
Cindy.
I don't know where to go with this because I know Matt suggested taking out kind of a platitude or an opinion in another section, which was, I think, no one parent has the right to remove a book for the other parents or something of that nature. So, and I agreed with that. I just thought, okay, all this opinion stuff, that's fine. We can just take it all out so it's not leaning to one side or another side. So I am not sure, this adds a lot of verbiage. And if we're trying to do sort of a general overarching policy that we can get passed through the board and create a skeleton for LEAs to then move forward, I'm just wondering if there's a way to do something like include long pieces like this or ideas of this nature as a section at the end of the whole thing, possible ideas to consider or something like that. That's not in the very general skeletal policy that we're trying to put through today, but is something that the LEAs can consider, you know, working through those legal issues and questions, Carol, that you say, and really honing in on the language. Because I mean, coming from my personal perspective, I'm like, yeah, that all makes sense to me, but I don't know if it's going to be different from somebody else's personal perspective and they would, you know, interpret it differently. So I don't know. This is my question. I'd like to hear from other committee members on it.
Other committee members, Matt, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Cindy's exactly right with my sentiment on this this policy. I want it to be general. Publicly, for the record, like I agree with this paragraph. I would love to see this in a policy that an LEA puts together. I don't know if this does become Appendix C, right? And you give different variations, but then you start going into these different directions and saying, okay, well, I'm going to give you 6 different model policies, right? And some of them are over here and some of them are over here. Then there's one in the middle. So although I do agree with this paragraph and many of these, all 3 of these paragraphs, when we're trying to create a general model policy for LEAs, I don't know if we can put there. And then to your point, Carol, I mean, I agree, like who is to say, like who's the judge on this to say those things. So I like this paragraph. I think it can be tweaked, Natalie, as we look into this, and I would love to get it out for optional inclusion for other LEAs to use. But for me, for this model policy as a state agency, I think it's important that we keep it general. Those are my thoughts.
So question, what is the definition of a model policy? To me, model policy means the best we can put out there. And that clarifies, and this particular policy we're doing it because there was a need to protect children. So
not only that, just to clarify, that's not the only purpose of.
But that was a major purpose of it,
even say that.
Is to honor because of all of the concerns that parents brought forward, to protect the innocence of their children from explicit content that goes against many of our laws. So if are we going for a general policy or a model policy is my
And
question.
I'll give you my opinion in that in 2 sentences. I think a model policy is a proposed policy for an LEA that is as lean as possible, so that any LEA, if Washington School District or Wayne School District wants to add language like this, that would be a choice of those school districts, and then the legal consequences would fall on that district. But my plan is to have something as lean and to some extent general, but it gives the districts a framework, the LEAs a framework for their policy. Let me
So
go
a
to
framework
Matt
policy.
and then Angie.
I'm sorry. I didn't know if you called on me, Carol.
You're fine.
For me, Natalie, the rule is what protects the children. And we've already voted as a board to put that, to make that rule, to say we're putting it in the hands of these LEAs. Now, of course, they have to follow laws, other board rule, right, statute that we have. But the model policy, it's like Carol said, it's the framework, it's the outline, it's general. It's not something that we're trying to lead or direct them to do. We're giving them a resource to use to help them go in the direction that they want to go. And that's what the rule has done, is that put it in their hands to say, yeah, whether, I mean, they might be looking at this motion that you have and saying, yeah, I like that, I'm going to use that. And others might be saying, I don't like that, I don't want to use that, that's not what our schools need. So yeah, I think the protection is in the rule that we've passed already.
Cindy, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, when I think of a model policy, I don't think of it as a fleshed out policy. I think of it as a basic policy that maintains the law and the board rule, and that gives LEAs a place to jump off from. So the same like with the 328 training, and I was like, I don't want 3.5 hours of this stuff. Let's just get it down to an hour. It's kind of a similar, but when I'm wondering if, did you send these ahead to us, Natalie? Because I keep wishing they would scroll so I could look at the third paragraph at the same time with the first and second paragraph. What I'm trying to do is kind of put this all together in a coherent thought for myself, because when I read the first paragraph, I mean, quite frankly, I really like the first half of the first paragraph, in my opinion, defines age appropriate. So when we say age appropriate, when I read your language up there, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. But I don't know if that's what other people are thinking of. And so I was just kind of wondering if we could, but I think I would probably take out the second half of the paragraph, because, you know, it's like a defensive statement about whatever. I don't know. But the first half really defines age appropriateness, and I think that should stand for itself. And wondering if we could combine that with some of the others from the other two paragraphs, and just add at the end some thoughts about age appropriateness or something. It's a lot to try to synthesize right now on the fly, but these are just kind of my thoughts.
I'm happy to bring it back next month.
Well, and my anxiety about that is LEAs need these policies now. If we want to be meaningful in the artificial lives of LEAs, that delaying is not helpful. So I would like to go till 12:30 and see if we can pass on something to the board. I don't think our pontificating is helpful to LEAs. I think they can hear or not hear our discussions, and if they want more of this language or less of this language, they can use it in their own policies. So I was really hoping we can keep our comments concise, which I just wasn't. Randy, you're next, and then Angie.
Can I ask a question? Natalie, could you email those paragraphs to me?
Yeah, I don't know if, let me
Or
just.
are they in backup? Did I just miss it? Did they get put in backup?
I don't know if they got put in backup. I emailed them to Jeff and Angie.
We
Yeah.
usually don't put things in backup until we get the thumbs up to do that. So I apologize, Board Member Klein. We could have and just didn't. I could forward them to all the committee members. And Kathy, if you'd like, Board Member Klein, would you like me to do that?
Be helpful.
Yeah, do you want me to, or I can send it? I've kind of combined them all into one because I know I had it in a few different versions to you, or it kind of got broken up in the emails to you. So let me send it really quick.
I'd like to keep soldiering on and hope maybe we can have something by 12:30, but Randy, you had a comment, and then Angie.
Thank you, Chair Lear. I'm putting on my hat of 16 years on a local board. I have sat around the table with a bunch of very smart people, but more than just smart people, they are committed to their kids and their grandkids. And they have very strong feelings. They want to protect their children. They want to do what's right for those children. And often they don't have the big picture knowledge of what are the laws, what are the rules. You know, there's a state board. I knew there was a state board. I had absolutely no idea what you did except make us do a whole bunch of work. I listened to the faculty and to the administrators saying, oh, we have so much that we have to do and so much reporting and the burden is so great. That's basically, in terms of content and all this great work that I'm seeing from the perspective of the state board and USBE, I had no idea of that as a local board member. But I did know that I cared deeply. And so when the state board did provide me with really valuable information that this is the law and this is your responsibility, local board member, to protect your children by complying with the law and complying with the rules that are there, then I'd go, oh, wow, who knew? That's really great. I'm so glad that somebody informed us, because there's so much out there and we're so busy trying to keep up with what is coming down on our agendas every month and what parents are bringing up in local meetings. So I would vote for lean, a very valuable information that possibly may not be accessible and known by local board members, so that they can step up to the plate and do the work that they've been voted in to do. They can take the responsibility that is theirs and do the very best they can possibly do. And any kinds of resources like these really great ideas that are coming out in Natalie's paragraphs here, I think would be wonderful things to consider as possible additions to their policy. But it is their policy as they interact together to protect their children, based on the law that they may or may not be familiar with, based on the rule that they may or may not be familiar with. So that's my.
Thank you, Randy. Angie Stallings.
I just wanted to make two quick comments. Number one, a model policy is not the law. So we want to be careful about not adding anything in a model policy that isn't already required in the law, because it could, and also, I guess I just wanted board members to know that it also doesn't have the effect of law. So the amendments could be creating a false sense of LEAs are required to do this. So if there are certain things that we want to require LEAs to do, that should be added to a board rule. The second thing is just a reminder that generally, I think this is the first model policy I'm aware of that the board has approved. In general, usually the board, of course, establishes the law through the board rule, and then when requested, or either by the board rule or by LEAs, staff will create a model policy and post it on our website, and LEAs can use it or not. It's really more of guidance or there as a reference. So this is kind of new territory for us because we don't usually have model policies amended. We've often provided model policies on our consent calendar as an information item. But again, I just wanted to clarify that any changes you make to the small policy don't have the effect of law. And so you may want to be careful about not trying to include things that aren't required by law, because then LEAs may think that it is when it's not in a board rule.
Thank you. Natalie, I'll give you 30 seconds literally to respond to those comments, and then we're going to vote on these 3 paragraphs.
Okay, well, I think, there's some other language in this policy that, like shalls and stuff. And so I thought, well, I can include that here. I know it's a guidance document, but they were using it, there's other terms within the policy that sound like a rule. And so I used that same language in my paragraphs. I don't see that there's any issues with these paragraphs. It's just basic common sense. And as far as what is already in law, just bringing that to the forefront. And each district could certainly, may have their own take on them. And obviously it is guidance. And so in my opinion, it's up to us as a board to set the standard, to put out the best recommendations, and then let them decide for themselves whether they want to use that language or not. But to give them the very best that we can, especially I feel like our children are worth it. And I feel like this is such an important thing that I don't feel like it should be rushed, that we should take our time and do it right. And if that means taking another month, and we need to do that.
I'm troubled that I think we're not showing the leadership that LEAs deserve when they needed this yesterday. Ashley, what else did you have to add?
Very briefly, I was just going to say that I think legally paragraph 2 almost creates a legal standard that doesn't exist anywhere in the law and could expose USBE to some constitutional challenges because that's not a standard that's found anywhere in the law. And then I think paragraph 3 goes back to the legality thing, and I think it's referencing code 60 or 76. I apologize. And so I think some of this is duplicative of it's like further explaining, the paragraph 2 goes to the age appropriateness, which is already a factor that's been included. And paragraph 3 goes to the legality, which is a factor that I believe is still up to be amended and to be included. But I think if that term legality gets included, that does the same thing of covering code 76 with the definitions of nudity and sexually explicit and things like that.
Thank you, Ashley. Cindy, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I do. I'm working on it, and I'm going to send it to Ben to put up on the screen.
Okay, we've only got till 12:30, which is 3 minutes. I'm going to post 2 options to the committee, neither of which thrill me, but I don't think we have any choice. Would the committee prefer to finish this up next month, delaying this for a month to get it to the board and then to LEAs? Or would you prefer asking Chair Huntsman for an extra meeting? Speak to that, please, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know what the urgency is with the model policy, right? When they have the rule. I mean, I know there's urgency. I don't want to go wrong here. How urgent it is, I don't know, because LEAs at this current time have the ability to create a policy. They don't need the model policy. So I'm okay waiting a month. Maybe staff or other board or chair or committee members have heard differently, but I'm okay to wait, would be my first option. And then if we need to call an additional meeting, I'm of course willing. This is important. I wish we had more time, but we don't. So those are my ranking order.
Thank you. Helpful. But Ashley, you want to speak to that?
Sure. I was just going to say briefly, I think the urgency comes from the fact that the rule passed puts a deadline on LEAs to create a policy of September 1st. And so just for me, the urgency would be that it gives them the opportunity, the sooner this gets out, it gives them to begin working on that this school year, rather than that forcing them into doing something over the summer, since the rule requires it to be in effect by September 1st.
Matt, did you?
Would it be, thank you, Chair Lear. I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. Would it be appropriate if this is in the works still for an LEA to reach out and say, look, I'm going to miss my deadline, or I need some help. And we said, well, here's the policy as is, but we're still working on it. Is that an option, or is that messy?
I don't like drafts of things out there. I think
Okay.
that creates that, and that I'm not speaking as the board's lawyer. I'm just saying drafts of things out there create confusion and could create legal problems, but Ashley can speak to that.
Well, no, that's perfect, Carol. I appreciate that perspective. That's why I just threw it out there.
Natalie, would you like to speak to another meeting or waiting till next month?
I'm fine doing an extra meeting or waiting till next month, either way.
Cindy, do you have an opinion about that?
I think we should wait until next month.
Okay, Randy.
But I think anyone who has specific changes they want to be made, if they could just send them early on so we can wrap around them, so we can work more expeditiously.
Absolutely.
I do have a couple more amendments for section 1 and section 3. I think it's
okay,
section
Randy,
3.
did
Yeah,
you?
so
It sounds like there's consensus already to wait till next month. Are you?
I think next month is good,
Okay.
but I'd love to get these amendments, and these ideas sent to one another so that we have something to be mulling over and responding to.
Is there any legal problem, Ashley, with the proposed changes among committee members to circulate to each other?
I don't see any issue with that.
Okay.
Maybe Angie or Jeff has better guidance there, but I don't see a problem with.
Okay,
emails on that.
I would agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could just add staff so that we can be preparing the amendments, that would be great as well.
That would be great. So
do you want to add my amendments in right now so that you have them and you don't have to wait?
We don't
you
have
can see where
time.
they go.
It's 12:32. We don't have
Send
time.
them.
So if everybody who would like to propose amendments, we have Jeff and Cindy's version. I had 5 amendments to those that were simple. I will circulate those that would be then imposed on the top of Jeff and Cindy's version. Natalie, if you have a completely different, sounds like quite a different version, if you would send that separately, and let's request that those be sent no later than a week before the May board meeting, no later than, so that we can all be processing that in time to have a more streamlined discussion of this. Ashley, did you have something else to add?
I was just going to ask Chair if you'd like me in advance, if I have all of those, so we can advance to kind of draft a memo of any potential legal issues that I see ahead of time.
That would be so lovely. That would be really appreciated, speaking for all of us. Anybody else? Cindy, did you have another comment? Your hand's still up, but it's okay.
I did a little compilation of Natalie's 3 paragraphs just as a thoughts for consideration about age appropriateness. I took out what would be deemed as requirement by law or whatever, but just peruse it when I send it.
All right, that would be helpful. Somebody else had their hand up, but
Sorry, it's me, Carol. I just wanted to ask quickly, can we, when this does come back out, I don't want to review the changes we've already voted on. I wonder if it could be amended already so that we're looking at what is already moving forward.
And I would appreciate that, but somehow Natalie didn't hear us voting on section 1, which we already voted on. So I don't know how.
I didn't have any amendments for section 1, but I did for section 2, and we skipped over section 2.
Yes, I thought we did that by acclamation. But if you would just send the draft of the rule as section 1 was fine, starting with section 2, and can I ask you to number the lines on that so that we could maybe communicate more accurately with each other? And then we'll also please note the request from staff, Angie, Jeff, probably Ashley, that we add them to our circulating comments. And no later than the last week, than in a week before the next board meeting. And with that, I will, without objection, adjourn this meeting and say thank you for your hard work and thank you for your willingness to slog through these things. So thank you.